On the continent of Samar, there existed the most powerful of all races, the Dragon Clan. They wielded the powers of ancient magic, and although they were few in number, their strength was unmatched. For the inhabitants of the continent, they remained a sworn enemy. The true reason for the war between humans and dragons had long since sunk into oblivion, and no one could say how it began. However, the war lasted for centuries, and the extermination of people and dragons on the continent never ended. In the end, both sides paid dearly for this battle. For many years, there were no peace treaties, no truces, no mercy. Even after centuries, both sides could not determine the winner and the loser. The battlefield was full of corpses on both sides, but the opponents continued to fight each other. In 1733, the Empire commissioned its most famous hero, Leon Cosmodius, the greatest of dragon slayers, to lead the army. They went into battle against the Silver Dragon Clan to destroy their queen, Losweiser, who was considered the Empire's #1 enemy. However, fate decreed otherwise. His own comrades rebelled against Leon. Eventually, the powerful dragon slayer found himself a prisoner in the Silver Dragon dungeons. On this day, the dungeon was guarded by 2 sentries. Suddenly, the sharp sound of high heels was heard in the darkness. Suddenly, a woman with silver hair appeared from the shadows. The guards bowed respectfully to her, addressing her as mistress. But Losweiser let them go, saying she wanted to talk to the prisoner alone. In a condescending tone, she asked what the famous fighter thought about his capture. In response, Leon, with a dark look, asked to kill him. An amused Losweiser asked if he wanted a quick death, but added that it was not that easy. She remarked that it would be a shame for a man with such a beautiful face to die so early. She ran her finger over the fresh scar on his cheek, and noticed that it matched him perfectly. Leon, however, turned away in contempt, demanding that if she intended to kill him, she should do so without further humiliating him. Taunting him, Losweiser licked the blood from her hand and invited him to join the Silver Dragon Clan. Leon responded to her with contempt, saying that she was hardly worthy of him, and his refusal only angered Losweiser further. With sudden fury, she kicked him in the chest and threw him against the wall of the dungeon. Chained, he coughed up blood as his already wounded body slammed against the stone pavement. Losweiser dug her heel into his chest and declared that the prisoner had no right to such arrogance. She warned him that he was no longer the great hero that people believed in, and that he threatened to destroy the Dragon Clan. He needs to understand this as soon as possible, because his destiny is to die in this cage. Perhaps he had an opportunity to emerge victorious in this fight earlier, but this may have been long lost, and Leon will never become a winner. Yet the protagonist's eyes blazed with determination, and he warned her not to underestimate humanity. At that moment, Losweiser wrapped her tail around his throat. The next moment, the dragon lifted the stubborn little man into the air. With difficulty catching his breath, he managed to whisper her title. She interpreted his broken words as an unspoken plea for mercy. But instead, Leon told her that she had made 2 serious mistakes. Leon explained that her first mistake was to imprison him, the most skilled of dragon slayers. Her second mistake was tasting his blood. As he spoke these words, his eyes flashed an unnatural crimson color, and he cast a forbidden spell. The curse immediately spread throughout the dragoness's body, and at first she did not understand what was happening to her. But now her body was not in her control, and the curse forced her to let Leon go. And Losweiser felt stranger and stranger with each passing moment. Heat rose within her, her strength left her, and she fell to her knees in confusion. Leon, having regained his balance, declared that the spell condemned her to a lifetime of suffering that would torment her very soul. And yet, in a sudden rage, she rushed at him, knocking him to the ground. Confused, Leon realized that the curse had taken an unexpected turn. Instead of breaking her spirit, it stirred something uncontrollable within her. Overwhelmed by the spell's side effects, Losweiser lost all restraint and pressed her lips to his. The next hour flew by, and both Losweiser and Leon found themselves naked. When the curse finally wore off, the queen awoke to find herself naked next to Leon. Furious and shocked, she demanded to know what he had done to her, and Leon explained that the spell was a forbidden art. By tasting his blood, she became bound to him by a soul tie, doomed to suffer unbearable torment if he ever died. An enraged Losweiser countered that if the curse only took effect after his death, then how could the events that had just occurred be explained? Leon, equally confused, admitted that he had not foreseen such severe side effects, and that what had happened was an accident. Before Leon could finish his thought, Losweiser sharply ordered him to be silent. Suddenly the protagonist's thoughts returned to one fact about dragons. They practiced monogamy. Thus, after his death, Losweiser will neither be able to find a new partner, nor explain his situation to his relatives. In the end, Leon didn't emerge victorious, but neither did Losweiser, since her line would end with her. Unable to bear his words, Losweiser prepared to hit him again. However, Leon stated that he no longer needed her efforts. because death would soon free him. He finally declared that the curse would condemn Lostweiser to live in torment for the rest of her life, and after saying this, he passed out. Soon Lostweiser was dressed in her royal attire again. She then kicked him contemptuously and accused him of trying to run away like a coward, choosing death as revenge. She insisted it was simply reckless. So, to seal his fate, she cast a spell that left the mark of a dragon on his chest. Leon Cosmodius was the strongest dragon slayer. When he was only 5 years old, he killed a rabid dog with his bare hands, and was noticed by a professional dragon slayer who took him under his wing. At the age of 10, he entered the Imperial Dragon Slayer Academy, and 4 years later, he graduated as the youngest student with the best results in history. At the age of 15, Leon first found himself on the battlefield with dragons, destroying many enemies, and during the campaign he returned several provinces to the Empire. Leon was known as the strongest dragon slayer, and the Empire's only hope until he was captured. 2 years later, after his imprisonment and confrontation with Lostweiser, Leon awoke from a deep sleep. He jumped out of bed with the feeling that he had lived through a terrible nightmare. As it turned out, he found himself in a luxuriously furnished room. Suddenly, a small tuft of hair poked through the doorway, followed by a little girl. She smiled widely when she saw that the man was already awake and greeted him. The main character was shocked. He was stunned by how cute this girl was. Leon convinced himself that this could only be some kind of heavenly reward for his service to humanity. The man was sure that this girl was an angel who had come for him. Then he squatted down and asked her name. The girl replied that her name was Muin. Leon really liked her name, but he felt a slight uneasiness. The girl's hair, with its black and white strands, seemed strange. Then Muin replied that her mother said it meant the moon, and that detail stuck in his head because he didn't know angels had parents. When he introduced himself as Leon Cosmodius, the girl stated that his name meant Leo. She said that her mother told her this too. At that moment, Leon froze. He began to guess that something was wrong here, and then asked Muin what her mother's name was. Leon froze in horror when the girl announced that her mother's name was Lostweiser. He began to guess that since the girl had a mother, a queen, then she must also have a father. Then the girl with a wide smile declared that Leon was her father. Leon literally jumped in horror, not believing that everything had gone exactly the opposite of his plan. At that moment, Muin turned impatiently towards the door where her mother appeared. The girl screamed with uncontrollable delight that her father had finally woken up, and rushed to her mother with outstretched arms. Lostweiser's lips curved into a smile, but it was more mocking, since it was addressed to Leon, whom she hated. Muin, however, assumed her mother's expression was happy, as Lostweiser visited the room every day. But Leon himself knew that her smile gave her away, and he would never have believed it. Then Lostweiser told her daughter to go outside and play, explaining that she and Leon needed to talk alone. As soon as she ran away, Leon asked if Muin was really their daughter, and then Lostweiser confirmed that the child was indeed theirs. Leon immediately demanded to know why she had given birth to this child, and moreover, why she had bothered to save him at all. Lostweiser said he slept for 2 years, but she never forgot what he did to her. Leon was already seething with anger. He declared that they were too different, they could not coexist, and that he would never touch her. Lostweiser only mocked him, asking if it was really torture for him. Wrapping her tail around his leg, she yanked him onto the bed with force. She climbed on top of him and tore his shirt, and Leon asked with horror in his voice what she was going to do. At that moment, the dragoness activated the spell, intending to carve her own dragon mark on him, binding him to herself for eternity. This mark was destined to be his eternal shame. From this moment onwards, he would live as her prisoner, unable to escape. When his comrades see the dragon tattoo burned into his body, they will think that he has betrayed them, that he has surrendered to the dragon clan of his own free will. Leon couldn't understand why Lostweiser was so cruel, why she had to go so far. The revenge of the dragons was a phenomenon that could not be understood. For dragons, revenge was inhuman and beyond human comprehension. For the Queen of the Silver Dragons, it was not enough to simply defeat her enemy. She wanted him to live the rest of his life in shame. It was a great honor for Lostweiser to break Leon, the greatest dragon slayer, and turn him into her slave and partner. Although it is too incredible from a human point of view, it was her revenge on the dragon slayer as a dragon. Meanwhile, in the Silver Dragon Castle, even the maids noticed the change in their mistress. The queen was in an unusually good mood, and the news quickly spread through the halls that the Dragon Queen's husband had finally woken up. Leon, having overheard this gossip, was horrified. Lostweiser publicly declared him her husband. None of them realized how terrifying she really was. She spent the whole day and night with him, almost breaking his bones. Enraged by his humiliation, Leon vowed that he would not remain her plaything. Moving silently, he slipped out of his room and crept up to the castle gate. 4 guardian dragons stood guard, and escape seemed impossible. However, there were far fewer guards in the castle itself than he remembered 2 years ago, and something about the situation seemed wrong. While Leon was wondering how best to slip past them, his gaze fell on something suspicious. Right in front of him, he saw a secret hole hidden in the grass. Although Leon wasn't sure it was a trap, he told himself that he couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. He would escape no matter the cost. Without further thought, he crawled into the narrow tunnel, muttering a farewell to the wicked Dragon Queen under his breath. At that very moment, Muan turned to her mother, standing on the balcony. She told her mother that her father was digging a hole for the dogs. The queen, lying on a chaise lounge and sipping wine, chuckled at how cute Leon was. Then Muan asked when his mother would come to hang him. With a smirk, Lostweiser corrected her, explaining that she couldn't speak so rudely about her father. Then a surprised Muan asked her what she should say, and her mother replied that instead of saying the word hang, one should say catch it back. Soon night fell, and Leon finally managed to crawl out of the castle and rush into the dark forest beyond. He believed that if he could reach the mountains, the border of the human empire would finally be within sight. However, to his horror, the sky darkened, and Lostweiser appeared above him in her true dragon form. She praised his remarkable speed, and Leon cursed her and rushed forward again. But the Dragon Queen quickly descended, landing in front of him and blocking his path. To his surprise, she was not angry. She told him that she had distracted the guards herself, and that the hole in the grass had been made especially for him. Although Leon knew it was all a trap, he knew he had no choice. He never expected her to find him so quickly. Returning to the human lands now, with her mark on his chest, he would no longer be recognized as a dragon slayer. But he no longer cared. He decided that starting over as an ordinary man would be much better than being Lostweiser's prisoner. Lostweiser, seeing his defiance, spread her wings in anger, furious that he could not appreciate her generosity. She grabbed him with her claws. Then they soared together through the night sky towards human territory. After 3 hours of flight, Lostweiser finally passed close to the Empire's border town. Then she finally let go of Leon, simply throwing him out of the grip of her paws. The man flew down through the trees until he hit the ground head first. But soon Leon got to his feet and looked somewhere ahead, when suddenly he saw houses and lights in the windows. The dizziness passed in an instant when he realized that he had landed near a human village. Lostweiser, now back in human form, confirmed that they were indeed in Imperial territory. He was one step away from returning to the human world. And yet for Leon, this hope was unattainable. Suddenly the mark on his chest began to glow. The Dragon Queen forgot to mention an important detail. When one of the 2 dragon bearers craved intimacy, the other's mark responded. When she touched his chest, Leon felt heat spread through his body. The desire was strong. It was impossible to resist. Lostweiser had brought him here to demonstrate his shame, forcing him to confront him face to face on the very threshold of his homeland. But Leon was not ready to give up. He said that he had decided to bide his time, patiently awaiting the right opportunity to strike back. He vowed that he would one day repay her double for every humiliation she had caused him. Lostweiser, surprised by his disobedience, smiled with satisfaction. She remarked that she had accepted his challenge and would wait for him, after which she snuggled closer to Leon again. When the moon rose, the Dragon Queen, immensely pleased, basked in the rays of her triumph. Meanwhile, poor Leon was left devastated and wept silently, deprived of both strength and pride. With a sneer, Lostweiser decided that from now on she would bring him to her hometown every month for more such meetings. Leon was horrified and said that she was completely out of her mind if she still wanted to continue sucking the life out of him. For now, however, Lostweiser announced that it was time to leave, reminding herself that their daughter was waiting for them at home. Yet Leon, still maintaining his dignity, stopped her, insisting that he would not be dragged back like prey. As a dragon slayer, he declared that he would act on his own. Lostweiser said it would take him a month to walk, but Leon insisted she not underestimate human endurance. Amused by his determination, the queen smiled, intrigued by how long he could hold out. After a while, Leon's steps slowed down and his fatigue became obvious. Lostweiser followed him silently, waiting for him to fall and admit his weakness so she could scoop him up and carry him. But even on the verge of fainting, Leon refused to give up. Just at that moment, they noticed something unexpected. Right in front of them, several knights from the Dragon Slayer army, who had been patrolling nearby, appeared. Leon's heart filled with hope. Perhaps these people could help him escape from her clutches. But Lostweiser immediately sensed his thoughts, and her aura filled with mortal threat. With one look, she warned him that if he called for help, she would kill him without hesitation. Then one of the knights ordered his squad to stop, noticing 2 strangers. He approached politely and asked if they were lost. However, Leon quickly lied, saying that they were just out for a walk. He couldn't drag innocent people into this. The knight dismounted and introduced himself as the captain of the 47th Squadron of the Imperial Dragon Fighters. He explained that the forest was not safe for them to walk in as they were infested with dangerous creatures, and so he kindly offered to take them there. Leon panicked and thanked the captain for his kindness, insisting that they could take care of themselves. At that moment, the captain seemed to recognize Leon's face. This immediately alerted the Dragon Queen, and she began to prepare her power, ready to kill him if necessary. Realizing that the situation was about to get out of control, Leon acted quickly. He pulled the Dragon Queen closer and told the captain with a forced smile that he must have been mistaken for someone else. He whispered in Lostweiser's ear, begging her to play along, promising that if she helped him drive away the knights, he would return with her. The Dragon Queen was amused by his despair and decided to play along, and together they convincingly demonstrated their love. The captain, clearly embarrassed by their sudden closeness, apologized, not wishing to disturb their privacy any further. As soon as the knights left, Leon immediately moved away from Lostweiser. She told him that he had been wise not to call for help. However, Lostweiser warned him not to complicate their situation, saying that just because they had a child together did not make her his wife. Leon countered that he never wanted to be her husband anyway. In response, Lostweiser smirked, pleased with his answer, and turned to leave, reminding him that they still had a long journey ahead of them. But before they could set off, Leon felt a sudden sharp pain in his arm. A moment later, he collapsed unconscious. The Dragon Queen sighed at the sight, clearly unhappy that Leon had fainted. However, she was amused by the fragility of people. Without hesitation, Lostweiser assumed her true dragon form, gently took him into her mouth, and threw him onto her back. Taking his fall as a silent plea for mercy, she spread her wings and flew back to Silver Dragon Castle. The next morning, Leon woke up in his room in the castle. Little Muen sat by his bed, watching him with shining eyes. Confused, he wondered how he had ended up there, and Muen happily explained that her mother had brought him home. At that moment, Leon realized that he had been captured again as prey. Looking at his hand, he saw that it was neatly bandaged, with a small bow tied neatly around it. Muen proudly announced that she had bandaged her dad's hand herself, clearly hoping for his praise. Then Leon smiled and gently stroked her head, realizing how different she was from the descriptions of dragons in human studies. She treated him with a filial warmth, and Leon couldn't help but wonder if it was because she was a human-dragon hybrid. He gently stroked her head, telling her how great she was, which the little dragoness obviously really liked. Then Leon insistently asked his daughter to remain as sweet as she was and never become like her mother. Lostweiser's sharp voice came from the doorway, noting that Leon shouldn't talk to Muen like that. Nervously, Leon tried to change the subject. Meanwhile, Muen eagerly showed her mother her father's bandaged hand, proudly explaining that she had followed her instructions. The Dragon Queen remained cold and offered no praise, merely stating that this was exactly what her daughter should have done. Muen simply nodded, already accustomed to her mother's sternness. Trying to lighten the mood, Leon patted Muen on the head and suggested that she go hide in the garden while he counted to 100. The little girl's eyes lit up at the thought of playing hide-and-seek. Looking at her, Leon muttered under his breath that he was definitely not like her mother at all. Then, as he began to count, Muen disappeared into the garden. As soon as she left, Leon turned to Lostweiser. He sternly asked why she was always so strict with the child. Sitting down on the bed, she explained that dragons were strict with their young, because only severity could raise strong warriors. Leon countered that Muen wasn't exactly a dragon, and that she was also very cute. But the queen replied that calling someone of her kind cute was degrading. However, Leon couldn't help but notice that even Lostweiser. His words only fueled her anger, and with a quick movement she grabbed his shirt, reminding him that he was nothing more than a slave for her amusement. Leon didn't answer. He understood her words, and Lostweiser felt relieved by his submission. Her mood lifted a little. After all, she was not just a woman, but the Dragon Queen of the Silver Dragon clan, burdened with the burden of governance. Leaning towards his ear, Lostweiser whispered that Muen really liked him. Leon later wandered to the fountain, wanting to escape the burden of caring for children, as he was supposed to be a dragon slayer. Suddenly he noticed Muen hiding behind a column. He noted that the girl was still too naive to think that he would not notice her if she peeked like that. Pointing in her direction, he claimed to have discovered her hiding place. And yet the girl remained completely motionless. This made Leon wonder if she was upset. Then he apologized for keeping her waiting. However, he was surprised when she suddenly ran away, Leon chasing after her, calling out and asking the girl why she was running. She turned the corner and Leon lost sight of her completely. It turned out to be almost impossible for him to predict the child's mood. Leon finally began to understand why Lostweiser had trusted him to take care of her. At that moment, Muen suddenly appeared behind him and hugged him. Leon was stunned because he could have sworn she had simply run away from him. But Muen insisted otherwise, explaining that since her father hadn't found her, she decided to go and look for him instead. Still confused, Leon decided he must have been mistaken. Then Muen took his hand and called him to follow her, insisting that she wanted to show him something. At that moment, there was another girl behind them, who looked remarkably similar to Muen, silently watching them. Soon the two of them went to another place, where Muen sat down at the table and began to draw something, cheerfully humming songs. Leon, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but smile warmly at the sight. While Muen admired her drawings, Leon clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, silently deciding that he needed to escape the clutches of the Dragon Queen. At that very moment, Muen ran up to him, eager to show him the family drawing. Leon was about to praise her, but his expression turned to shock when he noticed what she had drawn. There were 2 children in the picture. At first he thought it was just a mistake. He pointed to the second figure and asked why there were 2 of them. Then Muen replied that the other child was her sister. Leon, horrified by what he heard, quickly realized that the girl he had briefly seen earlier was not a figment of his imagination. The child in the garden must have been Muen's older sister. He regretted not addressing her directly, which probably hurt her feelings. But Muen assured him that her sister wasn't angry. She was just shy and nervous. Leon thought that he had never met this girl before, so it was only natural that she would react like this. The man still couldn't shake the bitterness that it was Lostweiser's fault, so he decided to meet her and demand an explanation. Meanwhile, Lostweiser went to the library when the little messenger dragon arrived with a new message. At that very moment, the sound of footsteps was heard outside the library door, and a moment later, Leon burst into the office with an expression of fury on his face. But Lostweiser only asked him coldly what he wanted. Leon approached the table and explained that he had learned that she had a sister, and he asked when the queen intended to tell him about it. Lostweiser smiled weakly, puzzled by his confusion about this, as he should have realized it by now. Leon admitted that he didn't expect her to have 2 children, and acknowledged that raising them was no small feat. He vowed that one day, when he returned to the Empire, he would add her name to his family tree. Then Lostweiser asked with a smile if he understood why she hadn't mentioned her second daughter before. Leon suggested that perhaps she was jealous of his closeness with Muen, and he was afraid that the other girl might be avoiding him. The Dragon Queen was stunned by his desire to meet her, but unlike her, who treated children with strictness, Leon wanted to maintain a tender relationship with his child. Lostweiser then decided to grant his request, although she warned him to think carefully about his decision. When evening came, Leon headed to the kitchen, determined to show Lostweiser that he was going to beat her in this war. Leon decided that his first step in getting closer to his eldest daughter was through her stomach. He started making creamy soup. All his boys liked it, and its taste seemed perfect for children. After trying the soup, Leon was pleased with the rich taste. Obviously, he hadn't forgotten how to cook. Leon firmly believed that with the help of this dish, he could soften her heart and win her favor. While he stirred the soup, 2 maids watched him curiously through the window. One of them could not hide her excitement. Leon had just recovered from a serious illness, but had also taken over the cooking. At that moment, the Dragon Queen entered the kitchen with her 2 daughters, and Muen joyfully greeted the maids. Then Lostweiser ordered the maids to take a break, and they bowed respectfully before leaving. Soon the food was ready and Leon carefully set the table, a delicious aroma filling the air. With a smile, Leon explained that he had heard that both children loved meat, so he had prepared a stew especially for them. He hoped that the dish itself would convey his love, especially to Noah, his second daughter. But to his horror, Noah remained indifferent, as if the holiday had no meaning to her. Leon didn't understand why everything went wrong again. Leon realized that Lostweiser had foreseen this outcome, which perhaps explained her reluctance for him to meet Noah sooner. Finally, the queen prompted the girl to introduce herself, and Noah obediently gave her name and stated that she was 1 year and 2 months old. Dragons, being long-lived, matured much faster than people. Then Leon stepped forward and extended his hand, introducing himself as her father and hoping to make a good impression. However, her aloofness unsettled him. Leon began to wonder why she seemed so distant, and if she held some kind of grudge against him. Sensing the tension, Muen persuaded her sister to talk to their father so that he would not feel awkward. But Noah's response was that the man standing in front of her seemed very weak, and she wasn't sure if he could really be their father. Her words struck Leon like arrows. It was clear that he was already facing his first crisis in his role as a good dad. Soon the family gathered around the table in the elegant dining room, but the atmosphere was tense. The twins sat side by side, their similarities obvious, although their contrasting character traits were also evident. Leon looked warmly at Noah and gently asked if she liked the food. But suddenly Noah cried out that the food was disgusting, and Leon staggered back in shock at her words. Lostweiser, who had been watching the scene with obvious amusement, covered her mouth with her hand to stifle her laughter. Muen, noticing her mother's joy, curiously asked why she looked so pleased, to which she replied that she was glad they were together. Leon also joined her, admitting that he was happy to spend time with his family. An excited Muen asked if their father would have lunch with them every day. However, Noah rejected this idea with a serious expression. Moen tried to understand her sister's reluctance, to which she replied that she wanted to study at St. Hate Academy. At this point, their mother intervened, expressing doubt about Noah's desire to enroll in the Dragon Academy, wondering why she was in such a hurry. Noah, however, confidently stated that she would like to defeat even more dragon slayers. Leon, wiping his face in disbelief, began to understand that perhaps she even intended to strike him down someday. He tried to gently warn her, urging her to consider the dangers of fighting at such a young age, but Noah crossed her arms over her chest and insisted that she was no longer a child. Lostweiser sided with her daughter, agreeing that an early start would better prepare her to face the dragon slayers of the future. She then turned to Leon and asked pointedly if he had any reason to object to their daughter's education. Leon realized that if he continued to resist, Noah would only become more determined to challenge him. Finally, with a tired sigh, he dropped his objections and decided to remain silent. Although he understood the whole situation, his expression betrayed his disappointment. He was sure that Lostweiser was using Noah to suppress him right during their meal. Finally, Noah was informed that the entrance exams to the academy would be in a month and that her father would be helping her prepare. The girl agreed with great enthusiasm, and her eyes shone with determination. Soon the family dinner was over. The girls were talking about how full they were and teasing each other. Then Lostweiser turned sharply as Leon called her name. The man, pointing to the table, noticed that the plates had not yet been cleared. Lostweiser initially reacted calmly, noting that such housework was best left to servants. Leon, however, countered that a real family dinner should end with the husband and wife cleaning up after themselves together. He hinted that she should decide whether she really wanted to set a good example for her children, even if it was just pretend. Muen, having caught the conversation, looked at her mother with shining eyes and waited for her to act. Then Lostweiser reluctantly agreed. At this moment, the girl's enthusiasm overflowed, and she declared that she also wanted to help. But Noah didn't share her joy. Instead, she grabbed her little sister by the collar and dragged her away from the kitchen. Once at the sink, Lostweiser turned sharply to Leon and asked when he planned to help. Leon crossed his arms over his chest and reminded her of what he had told her 2 years ago. He reminded the dragoness that she should not be left alone with a highly skilled and powerful dragon slayer. At this point, Lostweiser began to boil. She sternly asked Leon what was going on. He thought about how easily she had manipulated him in the past, but those days were over. Suddenly, Lostweiser struck, warning him not to think he could escape so easily. But Leon repelled her attack with a firm grip and asked who had ever said he was trying to escape. Lostweiser groaned in pain, struggling to conserve her strength. As she fell to her knees, Leon taunted her mercilessly, accusing her of being unable to fight back. He explained that the dragon mark had weakened her, turning her into a helpless kitten, a truth he had discovered from the ancient texts of her tribe. Leon added with a grin that Lostweiser was all about control and conquest, but now he wanted to see what would happen if someone controlled her. Breathing heavily, her face flushed with tension and emotion, Lostweiser screamed for Leon to let go of her tail. Leon, holding her tightly, accused her of disrespecting him from the very day he first woke up. But tonight they would switch roles. Lostweiser, unable to contain her anger, furiously replied that she would never obey, and furiously called him a bastard. Suddenly, they both heard suspicious sounds outside the door. Meanwhile, outside in the corridor, 2 maids were whispering to each other, wondering out loud whether the queen and her family had finished their seclusion. When they finally looked into the kitchen, they were amazed to find the room sparkling clean. Leon stood silently, hidden in the closet, watching what was happening with concentration. Still holding Lostweiser tightly, he warned her to be quiet, or the maids would witness her humiliation. As the door closed, Leon smirked again, mockingly calling her his wife, and suggested that it was time for them to begin. Although Lostweiser looked at him defiantly, her reaction was hesitant, and she seemed to have finally resigned herself to her fate. 3 days later, Leon's 2 daughters were sitting at his bedside. He had not moved for 3 days, and they were whispering their concern that he might be dead. Suddenly, Leon groaned in pain as Noah kicked him to check if he was alive. An offended Leon wondered if it was normal for a child to treat a parent this way. When he came to, he found himself lying in bed with little Muen next to him. Confused, Leon wondered when exactly he had lost consciousness. Then Lostweiser, who stood before him, calmly explained that she would help him remember the events that led to his fainting. A memory flashed through Leon's mind. He remembered how Lostweiser had hit him hard, and how at that very moment, the dragon mark on his chest lost its power. Still recovering, Leon sat silently on the bed, watching as Lostweiser turned her back to him. Despite her terrifying strength, he couldn't help but notice her beauty, considering she was a dragon that had lived for over 2 centuries. Muen, noticing her father's gaze, asked why he wasn't moving, and Noah assumed he was stunned by their mother's appearance. At that moment, Lostvisor accidentally hit the chest of drawers, and something that looked like a flower decoration fell out. Leon bent down, picked up the floral accessory from the floor and carefully placed it on the dragoness. He noticed that it suited her very well. Struck by his thoughtful gesture, Lostvisor asked in surprise if he had ever done anything like this for other women. Leon chuckled, explaining that as a child he had often brushed his master's donkey, so he had developed some skill in such things. Muen, puzzled, asked what a donkey was. Then Leon smiled and explained that donkeys were like dragons, only much smaller, terribly stubborn, and made strange sounds when they were unhappy. Lostvisor, who had been watching the proceedings closely, began to seethe a little. The next moment, she hit Leon with such force that he recoiled, clutching his stomach in pain. A worried Muen asked if he was okay, and Leon, with a tight smile, assured her that he was okay. Then Lostvisor firmly declared that from now on, Leon would take responsibility for teaching the girls to write. Muen was excited, happy that their father would be their teacher, while Noah, more calm, noted that she already knew how to do it. Soon the two sisters rushed into the office, discussing what colored pens they would like to use. Then Lostvisor informed Leon that her sister would be arriving soon, and firmly stated that she did not want him to appear in front of her. Leon looked surprised, not understanding why he had been ordered to avoid the meeting. Lostvisor reminded him that he was now a member of the Silver Dragon clan, having been in a coma for 2 long years due to a mysterious illness. She warned him that if he ever met her sister, he should adapt to the false identity she had created. Leon eventually accepted her instructions and said he would do as she asked. Yet, as soon as Lostvisor left the room, Leon doubted whether he would really follow her orders. Left alone, he began to think of ways to embarrass her in front of her sister. The scene then shifted to the children's room, where Leon sat at a wooden table, patiently teaching Noah and Moen to write their names. After writing down their names as examples, he asked them to practice copying his actions. After studying his handwriting a little, Noah noticed that his handwriting was not as beautiful as her mother's. When Leon finally stood up to leave the room, Muen asked curiously what he planned to do next. He explained that he had forgotten to give something to their mother, and assured them that he would return later to check on how they were doing. When Leon left, Muen teased her sister for seeming happy, but Noah refuted this, saying that they needed to focus. But as she spoke, a faint blush touched her cheeks. She was truly glad to spend time with her father. The story then moved to the majestic gates of Silver Dragon Castle, where soldiers and nobles had gathered for an official occasion. Aisha Milkway, Queen of the Red Dragons and Lostvisor's sister, arrived there. Lostvisor rushed forward to hug her, and Aisha commented on how energetic Lostvisor looked compared to their last meeting. Lostvisor, slightly taken aback, responded modestly, brushing off the compliment. Aisha turned the conversation to her sister's husband. She heard that he had finally woken up. She was surprised why she hadn't seen him yet. She sighed in disappointment, admitting that she was eager to see what the Dragon King who had kidnapped her sister really looked like. The girl suggested that such a quick marriage followed by the birth of a child undoubtedly indicated a bond of passion. But Lostvisor denied any attraction to her husband, insisting she had never experienced it in the past, and would never experience it in the future. Aisha grinned knowingly, recognizing in her sister's character the same traits that had always been inherent in her. Lostvisor then took advantage of the moment to suggest that they take a stroll through the castle gardens to continue their conversation. Meanwhile, Leon watched the sisters from afar through a telescope. Recognizing Sister Lostvisor, he studied them carefully, deciding to gather information as well as test the dragon pattern's reach. Suddenly, Aisha noted with concern that the Red Flame Dragon King had become unusually active, creating dangerous tension. Lostvisor froze in shock when her sister mentioned the name Constantine, as he had been missing for a long time. Aisha suggested that Constantine might be trying to take advantage of the unrest to expand his territory. At that very moment, Lostvisor suddenly tensed up, her body filled with energy. Aisha immediately asked what was bothering her, but Lostvisor, however, forced a smile, assuring her sister that everything was fine. And yet, in her thoughts, she cursed that damn dragon slayer. Aisha then advised strengthening border security, and promised to send her assistant Shinlong to keep Lostvisor informed of developments. At this moment, Lostvisor felt the effect of the dragon pattern intensify. Aisha immediately turned to her sister and asked if she was okay, because her face was very red. But the dragoness replied that she suddenly remembered that she urgently needed to sort something out, but promised to return in 20 minutes. Aisha wanted to help her get to the castle, but Lostvisor replied that she could manage on her own. But the red dragoness immediately understood what was going on. The two were clearly playing with the dragon pattern. Meanwhile, Leon lounged lazily on a chaise lounge, amused by how long Lostvisor could withstand the strain of the dragon pattern. His thoughts were interrupted when the door burst open and Lostweiser burst into the room. She grabbed him by the collar and accused him of deliberately activating the pattern to humiliate her in front of her sister. Then Leon decided to pretend to be innocent. He made a pitiful face, as if hurt by her accusation. The unexpected words had an effect on Lostweiser. She froze, her face turned red, and she let go of his collar. Leon smiled to himself as he realized his trick seemed to have worked. He wondered if Lostweiser was disgusted by him. The dragoness, blushing, turned away and accused him of shamelessness. He was nothing more than a prisoner who had no right to speak such nonsense. Then Lostweiser looked at Leon and thought that she had come here to confront him, and yet his words had thrown her off balance. Finally, she warned him that if he ever dared to try anything like that again, she would not forgive him. Leon, watching her leave, realized that just one word had been enough to throw her into such confusion. Lost in his thoughts, he noticed his own heartbeat quickening as his thoughts returned to her. Forcing himself to pull himself together, Leon said that he needed to stop doing this kind of nonsense. He firmly reminded himself that the children were still waiting for his return. Later that night, at Silver Dragon Castle, Aisha prepared to leave. She waved goodbye to Lostweiser, announcing that she would be leaving that evening. Lostweiser waved back and reminded her sister to be careful on the road. Aisha then transformed into a red dragon and remarked that next time she would like to meet her sister's mysterious husband. Then, accompanied by her faithful knights, she soared into the night sky. Lostweiser stood quietly, watching her sister leave with a worried expression on her face. She thought that the Dragon Slayer had not yet been punished enough, and she decided that she would teach him a lesson that night. Meanwhile, Leon sneezed a few times, wondering if anyone was talking about him. He then settled in to read Noah and Moen a bedtime story. Then he tiptoed out of the room, carefully closing the door behind him. But as soon as the door closed, Lostweiser suddenly slammed her palm on it with a loud bang, startling him. She demanded to know where he was going, and Leon looked at her and asked uncertainly if her sister had left. With a sly smile, Lostweiser replied that they still had some things to sort out that night. She grabbed him by the collar. Although Leon protested, she ignored him and dragged him along with her. In the queen's private chambers, Leon prepared a wooden basin of hot water for the woman. He announced with slight irritation that the water was ready and asked what she needed it for. Lostweiser haughtily stretched out her legs in front of him and declared that she was tired from walking all day and ordered him to wash her feet. Leon stared at her with stunned disbelief. Then Lostweiser ordered him to stop his nonsense and just obey, explaining that this was his punishment for the day. Leon sighed heavily and reminded himself that he had once been a dragon slayer, but now he had become a servant who washed dragons' paws. Looking at her feet, he wondered gloomily how many more dragon slayers had died beneath them. Lostweiser noticed the intensity in his gaze and frowned suspiciously, wondering what was going on in his head. A blush appeared on her cheeks as she suddenly suspected that he might have some strange attraction to her. Before she could react, Leon grinned mischievously and plunged her feet into the hot water. The scorching heat instantly shook her, and with an indignant cry, Lostweiser kicked him in the chin, screaming that the water was too hot. Then Lostweiser stepped on his chest, crushing him with her foot, and accused him of doing it on purpose, trying to get revenge on her. Leon, however, smiled haughtily, and reminded her that she herself had demanded that he wash her feet. Then Lostweiser angrily retorted that he still hadn't learned his lesson. She slowly ran her foot down his chest, saying that he probably never imagined that one day he would be stepped on by a dragon. As her foot pressed lower, Leon was overcome with conflicting emotions. His face turned red. He was torn between humiliation and a strange, pleasant feeling. Then Lostweiser, grinning haughtily, said that she wanted to see how long he could tolerate such treatment. Leon grabbed her leg with a sharp movement and declared that he had once tried pork, cow, and goat legs, but had never tried dragon legs. Lostweiser's eyes widened and she demanded to know what he was doing. Without hesitation, Leon playfully bit her leg, announcing that there would be raw dragon legs for dinner. The next morning, Moen and Noah woke up and went down the hallway to see their parents. When Lostweiser entered the room with her leg tightly bandaged, Moen immediately noticed and asked her mother why she was limping. At the same time, Leon appeared with a fresh bandage on his cheek. Noticing it, Moen turned to her father and asked why he had bruises on his face. The girl suddenly exclaimed that her parents must have been playing some game without her, and asked to join in next time. Sometime later, Leona and Lostweiser were seen walking together in the garden outside the Silver Dragon Castle. Both deliberately avoided each other's gaze, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Two maids passing by noticed them. One of them said that the queen and the prince seemed to be on a date. The blue-haired maid added that they really did look like a couple, although there was still some distance between them. Meanwhile, Lostweiser and Leon walked in silence. Leon, looking at her from behind, wondered how it could all end like this. His thoughts returned to the moment when Lostweiser had suggested that they go for a walk together. The dragoness explained that it was his duty to maintain the appearance of harmony for the sake of outsiders. Now Leon felt something unusual. She was not usually so proactive, and he couldn't help but wonder what she was planning. Meanwhile, Muen and Noah hid behind a tree. Muen muttered that their father was so stupid that he couldn't even hold their mother's hand. She then stated firmly that she would help them, and Noah, shocked, tried to stop her, convincing her not to interfere. However, Muen didn't pay any attention to this, running forward with quick steps. Suddenly, Leon and Lostweiser turned around in surprise, seeing a child running towards them. Leon began to ask why Muen followed them. But before he could finish, the girl grabbed his hand and her mother's hand, joining them together. Then, turning around, Muen announced that she would come back to play with her sister and ran off. When the girl returned, Noah pinched her sister's cheeks, scolding her for disobedience. Finally, Leon looked away, embarrassed, and admitted to himself that the situation had seemed unexpected to him. Lostweiser, also blushing, muttered that everything was fine and that they could just continue holding hands. Leon thought about how she always held herself in front of others, and yet something as simple as holding hands made her nervous. He then noticed that Noah and Moen always called her mother in front of others, while they called him Papa. He gently suggested that the word mother carried a certain distance, while Mama seemed warmer. Lostweiser looked away for a moment, then quietly asked if there really was such a big difference between the two words. Then Leon assured her that there was a difference and advised her to try it. He was sure that this way the children would feel much closer to her. Lostweiser's face flushed with his confidence. After a moment of silence, she pulled herself together, nodded, and agreed that she would try next time. She then asked him if he ever felt homesick, and the girl admitted that she couldn't send him back, but she had something. Intrigued, Leon followed her until they reached the huge doors of the castle's warehouse. Standing before them, he wondered aloud what it could be. Lostweiser explained that the place had no name and could be called a warehouse, a utility room, or anything else. She unlocked the heavy doors with a key and led him inside, and Leona slid in and exclaimed that this was none other than the dragon's treasury. Taking the bracelet in his hands, he thought that in the Empire it would be worth hundreds of thousands of gold coins. Lostweiser explained that the bracelet was a gift from her grandmother, and that in addition to war trophies, there were items with personal meaning to her. Lostweiser explained that she and her sister were raised by their grandmother because they never met their parents. Leon, surprised by this, admitted that he himself had grown up in an orphanage, never knowing his parents until he was adopted by his teacher and his wife. He then looked at Lostweiser with curiosity and asked why she had brought him to this place. Opening a large treasure chest, she replied that she had something that could help him temporarily forget about his problems. When his gaze fell on the contents, he froze in shock. In front of him lay armor made of black gold. Lostweiser smirked, asking if he had ever wanted those things back. Not believing his ears, Leon thought he was dreaming and asked if she really intended to return them. With a sly smile and a glint in her eye, Lostweiser confirmed that this was indeed the case. Then Leon reached out and touched the chest plate, and a faint blue light instantly flickered on the surface. Suddenly he realized that the armor had been enchanted with the mark of the dragon. Then Lostweiser, with a sly grin, told him that he had finally fallen into her trap. Leon froze, confused, trying to figure out what Lostweiser was planning. Lostweiser revealed that she attached a dragon design to the surface of his armor to enhance its power. This alarmed Leon, and he staggered back, clutching his chest, mentally cursing the dragoness, blaming himself for letting his guard down. Then Lostweiser laughed evilly, explaining that the magic had doubled its effect. She touched his chin, clearly enjoying his helplessness. Stunned, Leon called out her name in desperation before collapsing completely. Lying motionless on the floor, he realized that Lostweiser had successfully deceived him. Seeing him so vulnerable, Lostweiser reminded him that she had not forgotten his past actions, and was waiting for an opportunity to take revenge. The previous days had only strengthened her resolve, and when he was left unguarded, she found the perfect moment to deceive him. She admitted that she hadn't imagined how easy it would be to fool him. Leon, angry, now doubted the sincerity of her words and actions until now. However, Lostweiser calmly assured him that his doubts were unfounded. She admitted that she had not lied, that her feelings were real. Having completely stripped naked, she laughed, declaring that she liked to conquer, especially when it came to Leon, and then she accepted him as her husband. After some time, Leon was devastated again. He was glad that it was all finally over. He looked up as Lostweiser watched him with a serene expression. Lostweiser noted that the scars on his face had faded somewhat compared to 2 years ago, but he now looked more like a man. However, Leon, clearly unconvinced, declared that she was trying to deceive him again, confident that this time he would not fall for it. Lostweiser simply smiled and remarked that he had become smarter. Then she laughed and teased Leon, saying that his health was not as strong as it used to be. This remark struck Leon like a bolt of lightning. The next day, Leon showed up at the Silver Dragon Castle with dark circles and bags under his eyes. Entering the room, he saw Lostweiser and Noah waiting inside. Lostweiser greeted him with a teasing smile, mockingly noting that he hadn't slept well the night before. Leon replied that she was the reason for his bad rest, and Lostweiser, feigning innocence, claimed that she did not remember such a thing. Noah watched the altercation from the sidelines, thinking that the argument between her parents was starting again. Lostweiser informed Leon that the entrance exam to St. Hate Academy was strict, and from that day on, he would be teaching Noah about dragons. Leaning closer, she teasingly whispered that for now, these were the only areas he could demonstrate his worth in. Leon was angry and claimed that he had been out of shape the day before, but promised that he would make sure Noah passed the test. However, he asked her to give him something of equal value in return. Lostweiser agreed with a grin, but warned that his demand could not be excessive. But Leon insisted that a promise was a promise. Then Lostweiser laughed slightly and left, urging him to study hard, while warning him not to overexert himself. Noah, who was watching them, asked Leon why he had a fight with her mother. Surprised, Leon asked if Noah had really just called her mom. Then the girl quietly replied that she really did call her mom. Taken aback, Leon approached her and asked if Lostweiser had asked her to do this, and what she preferred to call her. Noah admitted that she preferred the word mom, and then Leon's face lit up with a smile. He was sure that she would like the change. Noah, slightly surprised by his cheerfulness, simply watched him. As she was about to leave, she asked when they could start classes. The story soon moves to the children's room of the Silver Dragon Castle. Leon sat at his desk, his gaze glued to the stack of Dragon Clan books. Suddenly, Lostweiser entered the room and noticed that Leon had not yet gone to bed. Leon noted that typical teaching methods for Noah would not be enough. He needed to develop an entire curriculum for her. However, he was sure that Noah was a very smart child, and he would definitely be able to help her pass the test within a month. Lostweiser's lips curled in pride. She couldn't help but notice how remarkably similar Noah was to her. Leon finally looked up, saying that it didn't have to be that way. He spoke about his own achievements, proudly recalling that he became the best student every year. This time, Lostweiser seemed to be at a dead end. She always thought of Leon as a reckless man who only knew how to fight and kill, but she didn't expect that he was also educated. However, she responded with a scornful smirk, teasing him for remaining her prisoner despite his intelligence. Then Leon muttered bitterly, comparing himself to a tiger in his most difficult times, being bullied by a dragon. Then Lostweiser's gaze fell on the bright yellow peppers. She asked what they were needed for. Then Leon replied that he brought them from the kitchen so as not to fall asleep. Lostweiser's expression changed, and she noted that these were yellow peppers of the Dragon Clan, too strong for humans. The effect of eating the pepper was immediate. Leon's face turned scarlet and his mouth burned. He began to pace frantically, patting his face, desperately searching for water. Lostweiser couldn't help but step forward, cupping his flushed face in her hands. Their eyes met, and they both froze. Lostweiser quickly looked away, feigning indifference and saying that her hands were cool and that perhaps that would help. Her fingers still lightly touched Leon's face, the touch contrasting with the searing heat. Leon relaxed, allowing the coolness of her hands to cool him. Then he said words of gratitude, and after that he pulled away, although the blush still remained on his cheeks. Then Lostweiser stepped back, preparing to leave, and warned him not to eat any more pepper. Leon nodded hesitantly, his gaze lingering on her, wishing Lostweiser would touch his face some more. However, he quickly remembered her usual ruthless treatment. After all, she was the dragon who had lured him into a trap. Determined, he grabbed the book and began to look through its pages, searching for a way to restore his body. There were many options, but none of them suited Leon. After several minutes of searching, his eyes lit up when he found the black dragon pill. Leon's grin widened as he realized he had found a solution. The next morning, Leon told Noah that he had finished grading her test and asked her to guess her score out of a possible 100. Noah, with a straight face, guessed that she had scored 50 points. Then Leon happily replied that she scored 62 points. She had underestimated her own abilities. Noah's eyes narrowed as she studied her test, her brows furrowing slightly. It was clear that she was not entirely happy with her grade. This child had very high standards for himself. Unlike his sister Muen, who preferred to play, this child chose to devote his time to studying. Wanting to encourage her, he gently stroked her head and assured her that scoring 62 points was already a very good result. Noah accepted his words with gratitude, but insisted that they now focus on correcting the wrong answers. Soon after, Leon was overcome by a sudden coughing fit. He quickly apologized, explaining that his throat was still irritated from the peppers he had eaten the day before. But Lostwiser had already explained to her daughter that her father had worked all night to create the best study plan for her. So, to stay awake, he ate some very hot yellow peppers, which is why he was coughing. To Leon's surprise, Noah suddenly handed him a small container, saying it was for him. Astonished, he asked if the gift was really for him, and she confirmed it, further explaining that her mother had sent it. Leon couldn't help but smile. He decided to thank his wife through their daughter, amazed at how caring this woman could be. He then suggested that they continue their studies together, feeling that in the process, the bond between father and daughter would become even closer. Sometime later, in the kitchen of Silver Dragon Castle, preparations for another task were completed. 2 maids entered the kitchen with the necessary ingredients, and Leon dismissed them, telling them to just leave everything there. He secretly reflected that he had deliberately asked for irrelevant items so that no one could guess his true intentions. It was a fairly popular medicine, so the man didn't think there would be any problems with its preparation. Soon Leon began the process, crushing the herbs and mixing them thoroughly. Then he added them one by one into the pot that was set out for cooking. A few hours later, disappointment overcame him as he realized that he had failed again. Leon regretted that despite following the method described in the alchemy book several times, he always stumbled at the refining stage. The separation method required high temperatures, but such intensity often completely destroyed the medicinal essence. Having come to the conclusion that he needed a new approach, Leon sat back in his chair and considered what could be done. At that moment, a flash of lightning lit up the sky outside. Sitting by the window, Leon muttered to himself that it was going to rain soon. But as he watched another bolt of lightning pierce the sky, a sudden idea struck him. He remembered his alchemy teacher once mentioning that electrolysis could sometimes succeed where fire would not. Then Leon decided to try using thunder to restore his magical power. Half an hour later, he stood proudly with a small pill in his palm, celebrating his success. With a satisfied smile, the man came to the conclusion that preparing the dragon medicine turned out to be much easier than he thought. It was at that very moment that his daughter Muen appeared at the door, curiously asking what her father was doing. Leon froze, shocked by her sudden appearance. When he tried to cover his work, the little girl tilted her head and asked if he was hiding candy from her. But Leon quickly explained that it was medicine meant for her mother. And then the girl worriedly asked if Lostwiser was sick. Leon immediately reassured her, saying that it was not an illness, but simply a remedy to alleviate exhaustion, although, in truth, he had invented it for himself. Feeling relieved, Muen happily asked him to take good care of her mother. Leon silently agreed, promising that he would indeed protect Lostwiser once he had fully recovered his strength. Returning to his room, Leon became thoughtful, pondering the potential side effects of the supplement on the human body. Deciding it was too risky, he put the pill aside. However, at that moment, the sound of the door opening caught his attention, and to his surprise, the Queen of the Silver Dragons herself entered. He asked what Lostwiser was doing in his chambers, and she told him she had heard from their daughter about a special medicine being prepared for her. Embarrassed, Leon thought bitterly about how quickly this little brat had managed to spread gossip. Still, Lostwiser reassured him, admitting that she was surprised he was able to brew potions at all in such an environment. Then she asked to see what he had created. Knowing that resistance was pointless, Leon gave her the small box, thinking that she would have taken it anyway. After opening the package, Lostwiser examined the pill and praised him for being able to create useful things for dragons so perfectly. The man was stunned by her words, wondering if she really wasn't joking. Lostwiser then told him he could keep the medicine, but sternly warned him not to eat it. Alarmed, Leon demanded to know why this could not be done. The dragoness calmly explained that the effect was too strong for the human body to withstand. He began to wonder if the pill was really that powerful. But the woman insisted that a human could not bear its power. An indignant Leon retorted that he had already defeated countless dragons in battle, and accused her of underestimating Lostwiser. Then, ignoring her warning, Leon demonstratively put the pill in his mouth, proclaiming that courage is man's middle name. Almost instantly, a strange force overwhelmed him, pain piercing his body. The queen rushed forward in alarm, scolding him and reminding him that she had warned him. However, she promised to try to reduce the drug's effects. Yet Leon, writhing in pain, resisted her attempts with all his might. He insisted that what she had witnessed was nothing less than human courage. Suddenly, Leon screamed as blue lightning engulfed his entire body. Lostwiser looked on in horror, trying to figure out what had driven him to use lightning magic on himself. A moment later, he collapsed unconscious, and Lostwiser caught him before he could hit the floor. Laying him carefully on the bed, Lostwiser exclaimed in despair that he had gone completely mad. She turned, intending to call the palace physician, but before she could leave, his hand suddenly grabbed hers. The dragoness shuddered, and looked back to see Leon reach out with a mad smile and tug at her tail. Suddenly Leon addressed her tenderly as his wife and asked where she thought she was going. Lostvisor froze, completely shocked by the way he called her. She demanded that Leon release her immediately, but he refused, stubbornly insisting that his wife should not leave him. Watching his persistence, she wondered if the lightning magic had affected his mind, clouding his judgment. Having come to the conclusion that, although he had acted foolishly, he did not seem to be in any immediate danger, she let out a sigh. Finally, Lostvisor relented and asked what he wanted from her. The man then smiled and stated that he wanted to have another child with his wife. His unexpected confession left the queen speechless, and her face flushed with embarrassment. She scolded him, reminding him that he could not yet take care of the children they already had. But Leon stubbornly insisted that he wanted a third. In order not to prolong the quarrel, the dragoness decided that it was wiser to indulge his whims for now. So Lostvisor agreed that they might have more children someday, and Leon responded to her words with unbridled joy. Emboldened, the young man called her the best wife imaginable and leaned forward, trying to kiss her. Lostvisor, however, pushed him away, warning him not to take advantage of the situation and wondering silently when the effects of the drug would wear off. Soon after, she finally lost her patience, called him an idiot and slapped him hard in the face. Leon fell back onto the bed unconscious, and she sighed and admitted to herself that she simply couldn't resist hitting him. However, her worry quickly returned, and the dragoness leaned over him, quietly asking if he was all right. To her surprise, Leon's eyes opened again and he muttered that he felt strangely unwell. Panic gripped Lostvisor as a dark mark appeared on his chest. She realized with horror that the dragon sign written there had suddenly awakened. Leon then grabbed her shoulder forcefully as he gently pushed her towards the bed. Lostvisor asked anxiously what he was doing. Leon repeated that his body felt strange. He explained that his chest was pounding and that an unbearable heat had risen inside him. The queen immediately realized the truth. The lightning energy and the dragon mark combined, increasing his thirst for life energy. In such an excited state, Leon grabbed her tail with his hands and admitted that he adored her smell. Then Lostvisor finally pushed him away and shouted that her tail was covered in dust because it was dragging on the ground. Suddenly Leon stopped and put his finger to her lips. Then he quietly remarked that she looked stunningly beautiful that evening. Startled, Lostvisor realized his attitude had changed, and for the first time she wondered if she secretly wished for the same thing. In a soft, almost pleading voice, he asked if his wife could help him. Overcome with embarrassment, she finally gave in, although she warned that it could only be for one night. The next morning, Leon opened his eyes, still feeling the effects of the previous night. Lostvisor was lying next to him. She looked at him and asked if he was finally awake. Startled, Leon pulled back in confusion and demanded to know what she was doing there. Sitting up, he groaned from the pain throughout his body. And while he was trying to collect his thoughts, the dragoness asked if he remembered anything about last night. With a sly smile, she showed him the marks on her back, reminding him that a dragon hunter should not forget such things so easily. Leon froze in horror, wondering if he had really left those hickeys on her. Then fragments of memories returned to him, and soon Leon had a ready-made sequence of the night's events in his head. Overcome with embarrassment, he cried out, and Lostvisor, still smiling mischievously, asked if he now remembered how he had begged her. As his panic increased, she repeated some of the words he had said, mocking him even more. In desperation, Leon interrupted her, insisting that there was no need to continue because he already remembered everything. He thought that although he had prepared an elixir to restore his health, he had never imagined that the effect would be like this. Admitting he had gone too far, he asked if he had hurt her, but Lostvisor calmly assured him that she was perfectly fine. He noted with a wry smile that she now knew he could handle it. Lostvisor just looked at him intently, and then she leaned closer. She grabbed his chin, praised his performance, and stated that she expected him to hold himself to such standards in the future. Stunned, Leon asked if she now considered him her servant. Changing the subject, Lostvisor recalled the bet they had made regarding his treatment, and asked if he had chosen his reward yet. Leon replied with a sly smile that he had indeed decided so. His request was that she send someone to visit his teacher and his wife in the Empire. Lostvisor thought this through carefully and explained that such a visit was possible. Leon's heart filled with gratitude, but he still thanked her more formally. Meanwhile, the story moves to the garden of the Silver Dragon Castle. There, little Muin approached her father and asked anxiously if he was sick. Leon, taken aback, wanted to know why she was asking. The girl explained that her mother told her that he had taken medicine, and that men never admit to being sick. Then Leon flared up and demanded to know how Lostvisor could say such things to a child. Muin persisted, and then Leon irritably scolded her. But in the heat of the moment he bit his lip so hard that it bled. Muin immediately panicked, tears welling up in her eyes as she begged him not to die, stating that she couldn't live without him. However, Leon quickly reassured her that he was perfectly fine. while thinking that her character reminded him of her mother. To distract his daughter, he suggested making a new toy. Muen immediately beamed and clapped her hands with delight. When it was all finished, he gave her a Rubik's Cube, explaining that she could twist and turn its pieces in any direction. Leon thought he hadn't considered using his mechanical skills for childcare, but maybe he had a talent for it. But suddenly his expression became stern and he felt something alarming. He squinted at the far end of the garden, and when Muen asked what was bothering him, he waved her off and said it was nothing. Yet deep down he knew he could feel the dragon's gaze coming from the direction where Noah often trained. Believing that the girl would not come to him voluntarily, he decided to prepare a toy for her as well. Later that evening, Noah quietly peeked through the door of her room. Muen was already asleep. On the table, she noticed a Rubik's Cube along with a note from Leon asking her to solve its puzzle. Noah chuckled at first, telling herself that she wasn't interested in children's toys. And yet, she began to twist it this way and that, and then, with a smile, silently thanked her father. One morning, Muen discovered that her sister often hid things in a box under her bed without telling anyone, so the girl decided to play detective and check what was inside the box. There she found gifts from their father. Muen was so engrossed in her investigation that she didn't notice her sister approaching her from behind. Noah immediately snatched the box from her sister's hands and went into another room, telling her not to rummage through her things anymore. St. Heath Academy is a school reserved for nobility and governed by strict standards, even for dragons. She judged her students not only by their own achievements, but also by the status of their families. For this reason, Losvisor took care to maintain the appearance of a close-knit family. So she gathered them all together and brought them to Sky City. When they arrived at their destination, the woman descended in dragon form. Leon then stepped forward, motioning for Muen to descend slowly, holding her tightly. The little girl, however, looked at him curiously, and asked why he had not turned into a dragon too. For a brief moment, he thought uncomfortably to himself that, although he was skilled at killing dragons, he did not have the gift of becoming one. Soon after, Noah suspiciously asked if he really couldn't transform. Faced with such a direct question, Leon was speechless. It was then that Losvisor came to his aid, calmly explaining that his body had not recovered enough to assume his dragon form. Touched by her words, Muen squeezed his hand and wished him a speedy recovery. Once they had decided everything, the family headed to the gates of Sky City. The streets were bustling with life. Muen's eyes widened in excitement, but her older sister reminded her not to get ahead of herself so quickly. At that moment, Leon's body began to visibly tremble. Noticing his reaction, Losvisor noted that this was the first time he had seen so many dragons since he woke up. With a teasing smile, she asked if he was afraid. Leon, however, denied it. He insisted that he was not scared at all, but excited. He thought that the streets were filled with prizes waiting to be won, and that he was sure to get rich here. Then Losvisor realized with irritation that her worries were in vain, because while she was worrying, he was counting the profits. Soon after, they arrived at the photo studio, and the worker immediately stepped forward, bowing low and greeting the queen and her family. As they entered, Muen pointed enthusiastically at the countless portraits of dragons hanging on the walls. Leon asked why Losvisor herself needed to come in person, and she replied that the inhabitants of the Sky City did not belong to her tribe. After listening to her explanation, Leon couldn't help but tease her, noting that her title was overrated. Irritated by his words, the queen kicked him sharply, and as he doubled over in pain, she retorted that her rank still remained above his. Losvisor told the photographer they were lucky enough to get an appointment with her that day. Then, pointing to Leon, the photographer asked about his tail, and Losvisor explained that her companion didn't like the look of his tail. But in fact, he refused to wear the fake tail on the grounds that they were an insult to his dignity. The photographer then took them all to the fitting room to try on their outfits. Sometime later, the two sisters reappeared in their new dresses, their faces shining with anticipation. After this, Leon came out, dressed in an elegant white suit, and Muen clapped her hands in delight and exclaimed that her father was very handsome. The photographer agreed that the suit suited him very well, and Leon recalled that the last time he wore such clothes was at prom. Smiling, he turned to Noah and asked her opinion. Embarrassed, the girl reluctantly admitted that he did indeed look handsome. In turn, he complimented both his daughters, telling them that they looked charming in their dresses. At that moment, the fitting room curtain opened and Losvisor emerged, dressed in a long, elegant black dress. Leon's eyes widened and he was momentarily speechless. When Losvisor noticed his reaction and asked what was wrong, he muttered that the dress suited her. With a faint grin, she added that he might look even better if he showed his tail, but he immediately dismissed the idea. Suddenly, the girls called their parents, urging them to come quickly. The photographer then announced that it was time for a family portrait and told the couple to move closer to each other. She then asked everyone to smile and began a slow countdown before taking the picture. Soon they have freshly developed images in their hands. The photographer praised the couple, noting that they truly looked like they belonged together. Leon immediately remembered how at his graduation, the girls kept asking to take pictures with them. But Leon answered everyone that he needed to return home quickly to nail the hooves of his master's donkey. The owner himself was shocked by his reaction, assuming that this donkey had knocked his brains out. Meanwhile, the photographer informed the children that it would take 6 hours to prepare the photos, and suggested that they enjoy a walk around the city. After saying goodbye, the family again went out into the busy street. As they walked, Muan tugged at her sister's sleeve and beckoned her to look at the nearest counter. Watching them, Lossweiser explained that it was simply a way for Noah to relax before an important test. As it turned out, the girls were enchanted by the prizes in the small game kiosk. Suddenly a loud noise scared both parents. The stand owner, however, smiled and encouraged the children to keep trying, assuring them that they would be able to hit the target if they did not give up. Watching closely, Leon noticed that the game involved target shooting, and Muen called him over to watch. Seeing Noah miss, he quickly realized that the game was rigged to always make a profit for the owner. Lossweiser then explained that it was especially difficult for Noah because the targets contained faint traces of magical energy. At that moment, the owner turned to the couple and offered them a chance to win a prize for their daughters. Then Leon looked at his daughters and asked if this was what they really wanted. The girls firmly denied it, but he immediately understood from their eyes that what they really wanted was to win a stuffed animal. Without hesitation, he asked for 10 shots and warned that Lossweiser would pay. Taking the weapon, he noted that he had not held such a weapon in his hands since his time at the academy. On his first try, he hit the target dead center, and the kiosk owner frowned, as he had rigged the gun to make winning impossible. Nevertheless, Leon continued to shoot, every shot perfect. The surprised man muttered that it was impossible, while Leon celebrated his victory. Moen was delighted to say that her father was amazing, and even Lossweiser reluctantly admitted that he wasn't all that bad. The defeated stall owner presented the prize, and Leon accepted it with a victorious smile before handing the teddy bears to his daughters. They embraced the gifts with delight, thanking their father. As Lossweiser watched this scene, she thought to herself that when Leon devoted himself to a cause, a special charm was awakened in him. Leon, catching her gaze, curiously asked why she was looking at him so intently. Nearby, another child pulled his mother's hand, asking for a teddy bear. As it turned out, Lossweiser was already holding a giant teddy bear in her hands. Leon laughed heartily at the salesman's disappointment when he asked him for 10 more bullets. Lossweiser warned him not to waste their time, but Leon replied that he was there to have fun with his daughters. The man also insisted that he could not leave her empty-handed. Although Lossweiser openly claimed that bears were useless, she admitted to herself that they were undoubtedly cute. Clutching her teddy bear to her chest, she asked Leon to come to her room after dinner. In the evening, the whole family had already returned to their castle. As Leon walked down the corridor, he thought to himself that he had undoubtedly been summoned to be intimate with Lossweiser. He hesitated, figuring that if he went, he would feel awkward for one night. But if he refused, the suffering would last a whole week. Gathering his courage, he decided to face whatever awaited him. To his surprise, Leon noticed that the door was unlocked. Opening the door carefully, he stepped inside and called Lossweiser. Hearing the sound of running water from the bathtub, he quickly realized that she must have been taking a bath. As his gaze turned to the door, he saw her silhouette through the frosted glass, and his heart began to pound wildly. At that moment, he convinced himself that the coming evening would clearly be difficult. However, Leon tried his best to control himself, trying his best to contain the wave of anticipation. A moment later, the bathroom door opened and Lossweiser appeared in front of him, dressed in her nightgown, and she invited him to begin. Leon, however, was in despair, horrified to realize that she was going to drain him again. She then playfully asked him which he would prefer, the living room or the balcony. Embarrassed, Leon muttered that it would be too embarrassing on the balcony if anyone accidentally saw them. Lossweiser agreed with this argument and stated that the living room would be sufficient. Resigned, Leon closed his eyes and took a deep breath, preparing himself for what was to come. Lossweiser, watching the scene in amazement, asked what he was trying to do. Stretching out on the pillows, the hunter asked in confusion if this was what she wanted. Then she teased him, noting that he certainly looked impatient, but whatever he imagined would have to wait until another time. As Leon sat down, he noticed the scroll in her hand and asked what it was. The woman said it was a test from St. Haid Academy, designed to assess a couple's personality traits and habits. She explained that they needed to prepare their answers carefully so as not to undermine Noah's chances during her assessment. After reading the article, Leon chuckled, saying it looked like nothing more than a childish compatibility test for lovers. And yet, unable to resist, he began asking her questions, for example, about her favorite color. When Lossweiser replied that he liked black and Leon suggested that she liked silver, they compared their documents. Then they both exclaimed in embarrassment that the result was nothing more than a coincidence. Then Losvisor suggested testing how well they really knew each other. When they compared the results, he triumphantly boasted that his result was higher. Losvisor, though irritated, couldn't help but be impressed by how many small details he remembered. If he failed, it was because the questions were vague. For this reason, his mistakes were quite natural, since she was never one to open her heart to anyone. Perhaps it's time for her to open up a little more to her partner. Meanwhile, Leon noticed her silent gaze, and nervously wondered if she was angry about losing. To break the silence, he assured her that it would be impossible to achieve the perfect result if they spent so little time together. He added that for Noah's sake, they needed to make more of an effort to understand each other. These words left Losvisor extremely confused. She slapped him lightly and ordered him to stop prevaricating and just write down the correct answers. Eventually, a week passed, and Leon happily noted an improvement in his average, but Losvisor was completely exhausted. Satisfied with the result, he was about to leave. But as soon as he stood up, Losvisor grabbed him by the sleeve and asked him to wait. She invited him to wash himself in her private bath before leaving. Leon, startled, asked if she really wanted him to use her bathroom. Without giving him a chance to think, Losvisor firmly pushed him towards the bathroom, ordering him to go immediately. Leon nervously wondered why she was so persistent, and even doubted whether she was up to something. In the end, he decided that she must have just been stressed out about the test. With these words, he sank into the bath, feeling his body relax. But the relief was short-lived. A moment later, he froze in shock as Losvisor entered the bathroom wearing only a towel. Coming closer, she admitted that the stress was weighing heavily on her, and that she wanted to get rid of it. Leon, in desperation, shouted that she should find another way to relieve her tension, rather than burden him. But Losvisor just smiled, and insisted that taking her stress out on him was the only way to feel better. Taking off her towel, she continued to tease him, asking if he had ever gone into the bathroom with the same thoughts in his head. Leon was speechless, forced to silently admit that he had no arguments. Then the dragoness dived into his bath, and warned him that he would not be able to escape, and must accept his fate. Finally, the day of entrance exams at St. Hate Academy arrived. Standing in front of the educational institution, Leon was struck by its grandeur. For a brief moment, he and Losvisor looked gloomy. Then, with a mischievous grin, Leon quietly teased her about her so-called stress therapy from the previous night. The woman muttered insults at him, but he only laughed and invited her inside. Soon the secretary called Noah Melkway from the Silver Dragon tribe. The woman checked her tablet twice in surprise, confirming that the little girl was barely 1 year and 3 months old. Leon, overcome with curiosity, asked if there was any problem, but the secretary shook her head, explaining that she was simply surprised. The thing is that the minimum age for admission is 1 year, but most children come here between the ages of 4 and 6. Losvisor immediately defended her daughter, stating that Noah was amazingly smart and that they respected her wishes. After confirming this, the employee directed Noah to the examination room and sent her parents to the family test on the 4th floor. There, in the spacious waiting room, Leon and Losvisor settled down on a sofa with 3 other people opposite them. Losvisor whispered softly, asking if he thought the others would be difficult to deal with. Leon muttered in response that they seemed easy enough to defeat, boasting that his old self could have beaten them in 50 rounds. He then whispered that he would not forgive anyone who did not want Noah to attend the academy. Shortly thereafter, the man introduced himself as Deputy Principal Walter Wilson, who was responsible for overseeing parental assessments. Leon and Losvisor smiled politely, though Leon had a suspicion that the man might try to cause trouble. The deputy director started with a simple question, asking when their wedding anniversary was. Both parents immediately froze. They exchanged tense glances, because this was exactly the question they dreaded most. Losvisor was worried because they weren't actually married at all, so Leon suggested they just pick a memorable date. Losvisor named the date they had previously agreed upon, 1733 AD. Together, they and Leon replied that their wedding anniversary was May 25th, the very day they first met in the dungeon. The deputy director noted how quickly their proposed marriage and pregnancy followed. The expert then asked if any of them had discovered any shortcomings or bad habits in their partner. To sound more convincing, Leon answered in the affirmative, while Losvisor stuck to their plan and denied it. Pretending to think, Leon clarified that sometimes he felt unimportant in their home. However, he praised Losvisor for her extraordinary efficiency in managing everything flawlessly. At the same time, he acknowledged that she often felt stressed out and admitted, at least internally, that he wished he could share more of the burden with her. During the interview, one of the ladies on the committee asked Losvisor what she found most charming about her husband. The dragoness calmly described him as handsome, intelligent, and responsible, listing one good trait after another. Leon listened to her with a smile, not sure whether she was sincerely praising him or mocking him under the guise of flattery. She then took his hand and told him not to squeeze it too hard until he felt pain. The evaluators looked at this and concluded that this was the behavior of a couple deeply in love. The interview continued in a light-hearted manner, and an atmosphere of harmony and mutual understanding reigned in the room. In conclusion, the expert suggested that the couple ask each other one last question. Losweiser smiled serenely and replied that she didn't need such a question, since she already knew everything about her partner. Then the examiner turned to Leon, who was feverishly thinking about how to finish the dialogue as quickly as possible. Suddenly, he asked Losweiser if she liked the teddy bear he had given her. The question completely stunned her, and she tried to understand the reason why he asked it. Blushing, she finally hesitantly admitted that she liked the gift very much. Satisfied with this answer, Leon smiled contentedly and declared that he had nothing more to ask. Thus, the assessment came to an end, and the examiner thanked the couple for their cooperation. A few days later, a dragon messenger flew through the window, and an excited Muen announced that a letter had arrived. Then the whole family gathered around the table while Leon opened the scroll. The letter stated that Noah had passed the assessment and was invited to the entrance ceremony. Muen immediately hugged her sister, saying that she and their parents were amazing. Then Losweiser thanked Leon for his part in their daughter's success, but he replied that it was not necessary, since Noah had handled everything herself. Then Losweiser announced that there would be a banquet to celebrate, and added that Leon would help with the preparations so as not to feel unimportant. And finally, the day of the entrance ceremony at St. Haight Academy arrived. On stage, the director welcomed the new students and congratulated them on their admission and successful passing of their exams. Meanwhile, families and children sat in the hall and listened to him attentively. It was soon announced that the first-place student, Noah Melkway, would perform with her family. Overjoyed, Moen applauded loudly when she learned that her parents and sister would be performing on stage. Then Leon, Losweiser, and little Noah headed towards the podium together. On the way, Leon remembered that just an hour ago he had been told that he was expected to give a speech. Once on stage, he realized there was no way out of the situation and decided to meet her face to face. The director first invited Noah to speak, asking if she had any advice she would like to share. At first, the girl said that her mother, a powerful dragon, always supported her and inspired her to be strong. She then expressed gratitude to her sister, who was always by her side. Leon, who had been listening attentively to his daughter, waited with excitement to see if she would mention him or herself. Finally, Noah thanked her father, explaining that he had sacrificed many nights of rest to help her study. These words touched him deeply, and the man even shed a tear. Noah ended her speech by expressing her gratitude to everyone present. Then the school principal, with a mischievous look, suggested that Leon kiss Noah as a sign of fatherly love. Panic immediately overwhelmed him, and he bitterly wondered if the man had intended to turn the ceremony into his own public execution. He remembered that just a month ago the girl had not even allowed him to touch her. Whispering nervously to Noah, he suggested that perhaps a hug would be enough. But Noah insisted that he kiss her and get it over with. Struck by her persistence, Leon hesitated. However, soon he finally leaned down and kissed her on the forehead. From the audience, Muen screamed that she wanted to kiss her sister too, but the maid stopped her from rushing off the stage. Losweiser, who was standing nearby, breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that the director's proposal did not apply to her. The director then praised the family for representing a genuine and tender bond. But then, with a teasing smile, he asked how Leon could so easily forget about his wife after kissing his daughter. Irritated, Leon thought the man had gone too far and cursed him for not killing him earlier during the evaluation. And yet, looking at Noah, he decided that he would not allow such provocations to overshadow this important day. Turning to Losweiser, Leon smiled and declared that they were the most harmonious of families. Muen, meanwhile, watched eagerly what was happening on stage. The woman couldn't believe her ears, wondering how he could remain so calm while she herself was on edge. However, Leon quickly leaned forward, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and immediately stepped back. The unexpected gesture stunned Losweiser and left him momentarily speechless. Meanwhile, Leon confidently turned to the audience and expressed his gratitude, and the crowd demanded another kiss. Whispering in Losweiser's ear, he admitted that he now felt relieved. Losweiser, realizing he was using her to relieve stress, became outraged and vowed that he would pay for it later, when they were not in public. Finally, the director let the family go, wishing them rest. As they said goodbye outside, Losweiser told her daughter she would pick her up for the weekend. Finally, Muen asked Noah not to forget her, and Noah warmly reassured her, saying that she would miss her. Leon then advised his daughter to eat well, study hard, and take good care of herself. But she replied that she was no longer a child. The man responded with a knowing smile and told her that he was simply passing on the advice, as her mother had been too shy to express it in person. Her father also said that if she was ever bullied, she should fight back, assuring her that he would always support her. The girl asked if he had ever done anything like that himself, and Leon explained that whenever he got into a fight, his grandfather would take him home and beat him. Leon then calmed the girl down by telling her that, unlike her grandfather, he would never hit her over something so trivial. Noah listened to him attentively, clenching her little fists, and said that she would remember this. Later, Losweiser studied a text on blood magic. She thought about how blood casting was a forbidden art that required the sacrifice of the caster's life. However, after studying the script more closely, she realized that with a few changes it could be turned from a curse into a useful resource. Suddenly the doors opened. To her surprise, someone had already returned. Her faithful servant Shirley entered the office, knelt down and respectfully greeted her queen. However, she regretfully admitted that she had been unable to locate Tiger Lawrence and his wife. When Losweiser demanded an explanation, the servant explained that the couple had carefully erased all traces of their existence. After reading this message, the queen came to the conclusion that Leon's master was not the simple farmer he claimed to be. With firm determination, she ordered Shirley to continue her investigation and report any new discoveries without delay. Meanwhile, Leon was training, teaching little Muen. He told her to repeat after him and hit with a stick like he did. Then the girl made a few quick movements, but these were more chaotic movements than what Leon had shown. Losweiser watched from afar, and the moment Muen noticed her mother, she let out a joyful cry. Leon asked if Losweiser had finished her patrol yet, and she confirmed that she had. The woman then asked if her daughter had behaved properly with her father, and the girl readily replied that she had been obedient. Then Losweiser announced with a smile that they would have steak for dinner, and told the little girl to change her clothes first. Muen was immediately delighted because she loved steak. The maid quickly led her away while the girl joyfully sang about the evening meal. As soon as Muen left, the queen turned to her husband. Suddenly, Leon jabbed the branch he had been using for training right into her face. Losweiser asked if he had finally decided to attack her, reminding him that such an act could be considered treason. However, Leon replied that it was just a branch and could hardly be called a weapon. But Losweiser countered that in the hands of the strongest hunter, even a branch could become deadly. Leon sighed and looked away, then asked the dragoness to give him a proper compliment without sarcasm. He then admitted that his true intention was only to scare her a little. However, Losweiser doubted that a simple branch could actually harm her in her current state. After a pause, she mentioned that Noah had sent a letter from the academy saying everything was fine. She explained that their daughter rarely wrote simply to reassure them, and Leon agreed, noting that Noah was like her mother in that regard. Losweiser recalled that despite the stern expression on his face, their daughter actually deeply admired her father's strength. She explained that, in the girl's opinion, he was a model senior at the academy, someone she needed to surpass. Leon smiled with relief, because until that moment he had been afraid that his daughter saw him only as a weakling and a nerd. Then Losweiser said that Noah often visited him when he was unconscious. She also remembered that when their daughters were babies, only their father could calm them down. A tender image of Leon sleeping peacefully next to two little girls appeared in her mind. Despite this, he admitted to her that the idea of blood ties still seemed distant to him. His thoughts returned to his own childhood, when he was an orphan and never really understood what family was. At the age of 5, he was adopted by his master and his master's wife, who treated him like a son. For the first time he felt what home meant, and yet sometimes, when he saw other families, he felt a pang of emptiness. The boy believed that everything would be perfect, if only his owners were his real parents. His adoptive mother consoled him by telling him that one day he too would become a father. He will have people to love and protect, a family united by blood. Remembering this, Leon felt a surge of determination, recognizing that Losweiser and their daughters were now his precious family. Suddenly Losweiser distracted him from his thoughts, saying that it was time to return home. Then Leon thanked her for the reminder and suggested they set off. She extended her foot towards her shoe, which was lying on the floor, and asked him to help her put it on as a token of gratitude. Leon was completely confused by such an unexpected demand. Despite her persistence, he flatly refused, because washing her feet was humiliating enough, and he would not humiliate himself further. In response, the queen kicked him in the face, reminding him that he still owed her for the kiss at the ceremony. She firmly ordered him to stop whining and quickly put on his shoe so they could leave. Having no other choice, Leon reluctantly agreed. Then Losweiser noted that his movements were quite fast, and Leon replied that it was easier to put shoes on her than on a donkey. This comparison made her furious, and in the blink of an eye she attacked Leon with her foot. Leon rushed away, laughing at the fact that she wouldn't catch him, while Losweiser gave chase in a rage. A few days later, Muen and his parents came to meet Noah. Soon a huge dragon descended from the sky in front of them. Leon noted with amazement that Leviathan was even larger than Lostweiser in her dragon form. However, she calmly explained that, despite its impressive size, the creature was weak in combat and had a gentle nature. She explained that the Academy used Leviathan as a transport for the cubs. At that moment, a beam of blue light enveloped Noah and lowered her to the ground. Then the girl announced that she had returned to her mother. Lostweiser greeted her warmly, while Muen hugged her sister tightly, overjoyed at the separation. Soon after, Noah hesitated, trying to call Leon Dad, but he noticed that she was still not used to it. As they walked together, he told Noah that he and his wife had prepared a feast in honor of her return home. Noah's report cards were on the table. They were marked with excellent grades and showed that she had taken first place in many subjects. Lostweiser smiled proudly while Muen looked at the results with admiration. However, Noah handed over another piece of paper and apologized for not being able to place first on the physical ability test. However, her mother gently assured her that such apologies were not necessary, and her sister said that Noah was still the best. Watching this scene, Leon felt he had to intervene. He analyzed the test and noted that it was perfectly normal for Noah to have less stamina than the older dragons. At the same time, according to the document, she had the highest win rate in the entire class, proving her exceptional mastery of strategy. Then Noah whispered that she heard that her father got excellent grades in school in all subjects, unlike her. To reassure the girl, Leon explained that he himself was not first in class at first, but achieved this through persistence and hard work. He encouraged her not to lose heart, confident that she was capable of achieving even more. Muen then curiously asked who would win if their father fought their mother. The question momentarily stunned both parents, but without hesitation, each of them confidently declared that they would be the winner. Almost immediately their eyes met, each doubting the other's confidence. Leon boasted that no one could beat him in combat training, making it clear that he considered himself the strongest. But Lostweiser replied with disdain that she would defeat him under any circumstances, even if he had received more awards in the past. The quarrel between the spouses rapidly escalated. Provoked by his wife's words, Leon finally challenged her to a fight, admitting that he had long wanted to show off his skills. When Muen asked if they were really going to fight, Noah stated that they should follow them and watch. Soon after, the couple were warming up, getting ready, while their daughters sat nearby to watch. Muen was eager to see who would emerge victorious, and her sister explained that watching the masters was one of the best ways to improve your skills. Lostweiser then teased her husband, wondering aloud if his body was recovered enough for such a confrontation. Leon replied that he cared little about his recovery, as this was a rare opportunity to fight the Queen of the Silver Dragons herself. Seeing his determination, Lostweiser suggested that they make a bet. She explained that if he won, she would not touch him for a month. But if she won, he would have to fulfill her wish. Leon thought for a moment, not understanding what kind of perverted demands she would make. But then, when he imagined the possibility of taking a month off, his anticipation grew. Leon pointed at her confidently and accepted the bet. The two then stared at each other with challenging smiles, ready to begin. Soon they took their places opposite each other. Muen watched them with sparkling eyes, munching on popcorn, but suddenly the glass of juice slipped out of her hands and spilled onto the ground with a loud thud. The sudden noise startled the couple and briefly distracted their attention. While Muen was crying over her spilled drink, the duel between the spouses began. Leon rushed forward first. However, the queen blocked the attack with only one hand without much effort. She then immediately countered with a swift swipe of her tail, but Leon managed to dodge it by doing a backflip, narrowly avoiding the blow. Leaning on the ground with one hand, he went into another attack and delivered a powerful kick. Lostweiser intercepted the blow with her hand, but came to the conclusion that close combat put her at a disadvantage, and that she needed to create distance. As she retreated, magical energy gathered around her, and Leon, sensing her intention, watched closely. Lostweiser decided that it didn't matter as long as she achieved victory, and prepared a long-range attack. Muen was worried that her father might lose, but her sister explained that both fighters were simply using their best strategies. The girl quickly came to the conclusion that their mother lacked confidence in close-range combat. Impressed, Muen praised her sister's insight, to which Noah replied that she had learned it from a teacher at the academy. Soon, Lostweiser challenged her husband to see if he could dodge her next attack. Leon, surrounded by sparks of energy, confidently replied that he was not only fast, but also resilient. With a determined smile, the Dragon Queen channeled her energy into a much more powerful strike. A deafening explosion shook the ground where Leon had just stood, and smoke rose into the air. When the dust cleared, Leon emerged unharmed, his body sparking with lightning, declaring that her attack was too slow. Lostweiser was visibly shocked when she realized that her husband had been using lightning magic to enhance his body. Then Leon, full of determination, shouted that no one was going to take away his hard-earned month of rest. With the speed of lightning, he attacked her magical defense. Assessing the situation, Lostweiser realized she needed to end the battle quickly, as his approach was dangerously reckless. But Leon had already noticed the gap in her defense, and smiling confidently, he rushed forward and tripped her legs. Leon raised his fist in triumph, already celebrating his victory. However, when he prepared to deliver the finishing blow, he saw the girl falling. With a quick movement, he grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him, preventing her from falling to the ground. Thus, the battle suddenly stopped. At that moment, Leon panicked as he felt a sudden blaze of dragon flames erupt in his chest. He cried out in despair and said it was burning him. Then Lostweiser scolded him sharply for allowing himself to be distracted in the heat of battle, and the flames quickly died down. The daughters hurried to him, and Muen impatiently asked who had won the fight. Leon sighed and admitted that because he let his guard down, he lost. Lostweiser admitted that he fought even without his equipment, and Leon boastfully added that otherwise he would have surely defeated her. With a victorious smile, the dragoness reminded him that since he had admitted his defeat, he should not forget about the bet they had made. Remembering the bet, Leon collapsed to the ground in despair, realizing too late that he had forgotten that part of their agreement. The girls asked if their father was dead, but Lostweiser calmly reassured them, explaining that he had merely overexerted himself and would soon recover. That night, Leon came to the nursery to say goodbye to his daughters. He asked Noah to take care of Muen in his absence, and told the younger one to behave properly. Soon after, emotions overwhelmed him, and he admitted that he was worried about leaving his daughters alone. Noah, however, looked at him skeptically, wondering why he was being so dramatic when he had only spent one night with their mother. Leon then confessed that the night of torture at the hands of his wife was worse than execution. Muen, amused, said that their mother was going to eat their father. She explained that she had read in a book that the female praying mantis would consume the male after the mating ritual, and Leon said that was exactly what was in store for him. At that moment, Lostweiser appeared and scolded him in a stern voice for talking such nonsense to the girls. Immediately after this, she put her daughters to bed, saying that she just wanted to discuss something interesting with their father. The puzzled girls whispered among themselves, wondering what these mysterious, interesting things could be. Finally losing her patience, Lostweiser grabbed Leon by the arm and dragged him away, declaring that he had had enough. Noah, watching him disappear through the door, muttered that these adults were hopelessly immature. 2 bottles of wine and glasses were already waiting for him in the queen's chambers. Lostweiser poured herself a drink and offered him one too, but Leon refused. Hearing his refusal, she reminded him that after losing the bet he had promised to grant her request. However, Leon muttered that he was not in the mood, claiming that he needed to keep a clear head to avoid her manipulation. To his surprise, Lostweiser admitted that in truth, she wanted him to win the fight. Leon, confused by this confession, asked why she needed it. She explained that if he won, he would get a month off, and perhaps during that time he would become more interesting to her. He asked suspiciously why she didn't just give in if that was her wish. Slowly approaching him, the queen explained that she had come up with something more interesting. She then poured wine over her body, declaring that she loved the look on his face when he was defeated. A shocked Leon stuttered nervously, demanding to know what she was doing. Then Lostweiser ordered him to drink it all. Suddenly, the man found himself stunned by the mixture of the aroma of wine with the queen's perfume. The sight became irresistible to him. On impulse, he leaned over and began drinking the wine straight from her skin. His unexpected action caused Lostweiser to sigh in surprise, and with a weak smile she muttered that it clearly wasn't enough. Then Lostweiser ordered him to open his mouth, immediately after which she bit her lip until it bled. Suddenly a scarlet drop fell into his mouth. Alarm gripped Leon when he realized it was blood. He pushed her away and demanded to know what she was trying to do. A strange sensation pierced him, and he accused her of casting a forbidden spell. Then Lostweiser calmly confirmed that it was indeed a blood curse, one he was already familiar with. Immediately his eyes began to glow with an intense red light. Leon asked why she did it, and Lostweiser explained that she was bothered by the remnants of a spell he had once cast on her. He asked if she understood the value of such magic, but in response, the dragoness only smiled and replied that she had changed the spell so that only the enchantment effect remained. Under its influence, Leon screamed that his body was burning and his mind was plunging into darkness. Then Lostweiser pressed her hand to his chest and confessed that she always forced him to stay close to her, even against his will. But now she wanted him to obey her voluntarily and beg her to do him a favor. For the cunning dragoness, the game was just beginning. Lostweiser teased him, asking if a brave man couldn't control himself more against dragons. Then, showing the magical artifact she had purchased in the Sky City, she explained that it could record images. Under the pressure of her spell, Leon admitted that he wanted to kiss her, With a mischievous smile, Losweiser demanded that he say it louder. In a fit of despair, he screamed that he wanted to kiss her, although almost immediately he tried to refute his own words. Then the woman cupped his face in her hands and laughed at how pathetic he had become, forgetting his pride to beg for a kiss. However, she stated that she would not give him what he asked for. Suddenly, overcome with emotion, Leon rushed forward, shouting her name and pushing her to the ground. The man pressed her to the bed, holding his breath. Meanwhile, Losweiser noted with a smile that such impatience was unusual for him. Still holding her hand, he confessed his desire to kiss and hug her, and finally admitted that he wanted to make love to her. Losweiser immediately realized that this was the effect of the blood curse. Smiling, she whispered that it seemed like this day had finally broken him. She had decided to give in since his plea was so insistent. Pulling Leon close to her, she told him to show his true face after the fall. In the morning, Leon suddenly woke up next to his wife. Pressing his hand to his forehead, he cursed himself for falling into the same trap again. He thought bitterly that the blood curse had robbed him of his pride and forced him to beg at her feet. Gritting his teeth, he admitted that this humiliation surpassed all others he had ever endured. Meanwhile, Losweiser, the cause of all this, slept peacefully as if nothing had happened. Leon looked at her face, surprised at how vulnerable she seemed in her sleep, and suddenly his hand reached out to stroke her cheek. Astonished by his own action, he stepped back, asking himself what he was doing. Leon tried to convince himself that he had only wanted to wake her up, that his gesture had no other meaning. Yet her lack of response alarmed him, and he began to wonder if she was pretending to be asleep. The man ordered Losweiser to stop playing, demanding that she open her eyes. Then, with growing concern, he asked himself why she, who had always been so disciplined, remained motionless. Now he wondered if her strange dream was a consequence of the blood curse itself. Thus, given the healthy, strong body of the Dragon Queen, Losweiser will remain unconscious for at least a week. Leon stood by the bed, looking at her motionless figure. For the first time, he realized that this might be the perfect moment to escape. Having already dressed, he made a plan in his mind to mix potions, increase his strength, and run at maximum speed back to human territory. Standing near the edge of the bed, Leon laughed, confident that by the time Losweiser woke up, he would already be far away. A triumphant laugh escaped his lips, but suddenly it was cut off. He leaned forward, his head hanging low, the weight of his own thoughts weighing him down. Clutching the flask of potion, Leon thought that 2 long years had passed since he left the Empire, and this thought instantly sobered him up. He realized that a rash return now would be dangerous, given that many questions remained surrounding his capture and imprisonment. Perhaps it would have been wiser to wait after all. He had asked Losweiser to find out the location of his former master. However, another thought struck him even more strongly. At that moment, Leon realized that he couldn't just abandon his 2 daughters. Crossing his arms over his chest, he admitted to himself that he had to stay in the Silver Dragon Castle for now. Looking back at the sleeping Losweiser, he considered the humiliation of the previous night. Then the man whispered that he would find a way to take revenge. Soon, Muen crept closer to the bed and asked if their mother was really okay, noting that she had slept all day. Noah, standing next to her, gave her father a sharp look and asked what exactly had happened between him and Losweiser that night. Then Leon came up with a harmless explanation that they had simply been talking late on the balcony and that she had simply caught a cold. He then turned to the maid Anna, asking if the Dragon Queen's condition could be serious. But Anna calmed him down. She explained that the doctor had already examined her and found nothing dangerous. The weakness was temporary. The maid offered to take care of the household chores in Losweiser's absence, and the man agreed. Meanwhile, Muen leaned towards her mother and whispered a promise that she would not be naughty anymore, if only her mother got better soon. Watching this scene, Leon noticed how profusely Losweiser was sweating, and quietly decided that he should wash her later. But Noah suddenly asked her father if he intended to take advantage of the situation. Leon refuted this, insisting that she was making things up, and that his only concern was taking proper care of his wife. Noah didn't press the issue further, but instead told Muen that they should leave and come back the next day. Standing at the door, Muen tenderly bid her father good night, and he returned the favor before the 2 girls disappeared down the hallway. Finding himself alone again with his sleeping wife, Leon stopped, not knowing what to do, and finally decided to go get some water. Returning with a basin, he wet a rag and wrung it out, then began to wipe away the sweat with it. During the process, he said that he did it only so that she would not catch a cold, and that his gesture should not be misunderstood. He watched her, noting that she was so weak that she couldn't even show her huge tail. When he finished, Leon wondered if he should change her clothes too. Opening the closet, he found a lot of clothes and decided that he could choose what he liked. A hint of mischief crossed his mind, and he began to pick out an off-the-shoulder outfit with a daring neckline and stockings. Once the right style of clothing had been chosen, The man thought about what kind of hairstyle he would give her. Looking at her hair, Leon wondered if it wouldn't be better to braid it. Finally, with a satisfied smile, he stepped back and admired the result. Lostvisor had transformed into a bunny girl. To his own surprise, he admitted to himself that she looked undeniably beautiful. Suddenly, the dragon mark on his chest began to glow. Grabbing his shirt, Leon asked himself why she reacted at such a moment. He remembered the explanation. The sign flashed whenever one bearer desired another. However, Leon denied any conscious desire and accused the revealing suit of betrayal. He soon felt relieved that he had avoided a serious mistake. Yet he regretted that this rare moment of Lostvisor's changing had not left a lasting memory. But then another thought flashed through his mind. There was a camera somewhere in the room. He rushed to look for her, searching frantically, and soon found the device. With triumphant glee, Leon began to photograph his wife. Now she would be the one at a disadvantage. He gently touched her face with his fingers and forced himself to smile for the photograph. Leon said to himself that these images would be carefully preserved. At that moment, Lostvisor stirred and muttered something in her sleep. Leon froze in panic, fearing that she had woken up too early. Bending low to check, he was relieved to find that she was still unconscious. He sighed and clutched his chest to slow his racing heart, deciding it would be best to change her clothes and put off his plans until tomorrow. The next day, Muin ran down the hallway, desperately calling for her sister. Noah crossed her arms and stopped her, demanding to know what happened. Muin explained that her Rubik's Cube was broken, and when she went to look for their father to fix it, she couldn't find him anywhere. Noah's face registered suspicion, and she wondered if he had taken advantage of their mother's unconsciousness to slip away. But then, softening, she assured her younger sister that there was no need to be afraid, and said that they would look for him together. Entering one room after another, they realized with disappointment that everywhere was empty. Muin even looked into the big barrel, calling for her dad. Eventually, the girl decided that perhaps their father was lost, since they had already looked everywhere. Noah's expression darkened, and she said that good people always leave sooner or later, as had happened once before. Muin tilted her head to the side in confusion and asked what she meant. Noah replied that if her suspicions were correct, the man had already left, that he had finally managed to escape. She thought bitterly that their family had always seemed harmonious, but in reality it was built on illusions and lies. She recalled that for as long as she could remember, their father was always sleeping, and their mother explained that he was their parent. When he finally woke up, his first instinct was to run away, and from then on, Noah felt like Dad stayed because he had no choice. Noah later recalled how he gradually drew closer, trying to act like a good father to win their trust. But she didn't know if it was genuine love or just a calculated move to lower their guard so he could escape. Thinking about this, Noah told herself that when love has unknown motives behind it, it is better to never receive it at all. The girl understood that he really had no place in this place, and that sooner or later he would disappear from their lives. Muin cried bitterly, complaining that their mother did not wake up and that their father did not love them. She asked her sister what they should do now. Then Noah gently cupped the girl's face in her hands, comforting her and promising that her older sister would protect her. Then Muin clung to her and cried even harder, burying her face in Noah's arms. At that moment, the girl announced that they would hold a farewell ceremony for this man. Meanwhile, the story moved to the mountains beyond the Silver Dragon's sanctuary. Leon looked at the scenery, noting to himself that it was indeed beautiful, and acknowledging that the maid had not lied about it. Then his thoughts returned to the moment when he asked Anne about the places Her Majesty most often visited. The maid offered to send someone to accompany him, but Leon refused, asking only that she mark the places on the map. Now he planned to explore these areas. According to him, the man intended to prepare a surprise for Lostvisor. But in reality, this investigation was just a cover for his deeper goal, to set in motion a plan for revenge. His true goal was to humiliate her in her favorite places, taking advantage of the fact that when she woke up, she would be weak. Approaching the large tree, Leon examined its size and concluded that it was strong enough for his plan. He imagined the scene and decided that the position was simply ideal. Leon then turned to admire the view, and noticed that the Silver Dragon Castle was clearly visible from there. After checking the map again, he decided to add this forest to his list of chosen places. When the preparations were almost complete, he came to the conclusion that all he needed now was for Lostvisor to wake up. Smiling with satisfaction, Leon promised himself that this time it wouldn't be Lostvisor who would win. Returning to the castle courtyard, the man's attention was drawn to the sound of crying near the fire. As he approached, he discovered a group of gathered maids and asked what had caused such a commotion. One of them explained that their highnesses the princesses were asked to conduct the funeral and light the fire. Ahead of the portrait, Muin knelt down, crying and handing her father a stake, begging him to come back to them. Noah, standing next to her, told her little sister to accept that he was already gone. Watching this scene, Leon wondered if the children were playing some new game. Then he decided to take part in their game and stepped forward. The maids gasped in shock, recognizing him as the prince. Turning to the girls, he asked who they were honoring and even offered to play a musical instrument for the ceremony. But when his gaze fell on the portrait, he froze, because it was he who was depicted on it. A satisfied smile touched his lips as he admitted that he looked quite attractive in the photo. But suddenly the realization of this struck him like a lightning strike. A cry of despair escaped him. The man did not understand what was happening. Shocked, Muen pointed at him and screamed that it was their father in front of them. Then Leon asked his daughters if they were burying him too early, since he had only been gone for a day. At that moment, Muen began to cry in earnest. Overwhelmed with emotion, she threw herself straight into his arms. Crying, the girl said she thought he no longer loved her. Then Leon pulled her close, gently stroking her head, and assured her that such an idea was nonsense, that he would never stop loving them. Meanwhile, Noah admitted that she and her sister had been looking for him for a long time, and, unable to find him, assumed that he had already left. Realizing this, she admitted to herself that she had wrongly accused him. Then Leon lifted Muen into his arms and told all the assembled maids that the ceremony was over, and they could go. Suddenly the girl asked if she could now eat the offerings she had brought to his funeral. When Leon put her down, she immediately ran excitedly to the table, and Leon thought that she was very greedy, unlike him. Soon after, Noah approached him and asked that next time, if he wanted to leave, he should at least warn them in advance. She added that Muen was very worried. Leon then apologized for causing them grief, realizing that Noah was also worried, although she was too proud to admit it. To his surprise, Noah admitted that the misunderstanding was her fault, because she didn't trust him. Her apology deeply affected him. It was then that Leon realized that the farewell ceremony was nothing more than a misunderstanding born of her mistrust. Capable children always consciously take some of the blame. But this mistake was only because he did not give her a sense of security. He realized that Noah craved affection, but would never reach out for it first, or trust promises easily. Leon came to the conclusion that the only way to calm her down was to use actions, not words. Leon gently stroked her head and assured her that they would have dinner together that evening, and promised that he would always be by their side. The next day, Losvisor finally stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open slowly. Muen immediately screamed with uncontrollable joy, exclaiming that her mother had finally woken up. The girl explained that she was so worried because her mother slept unusually long. Losvisor smiled slightly and apologized to her daughter for the inconvenience, but then she shuddered and realized that her body was empty. She could no longer feel the flow of her magic. Her power as a dragon queen was depleted because she used her power to protect him from the curse's effects. Losvisor noted that, knowing Leon's character, he had most likely already taken advantage of the situation to escape. Losvisor decided there was still time to catch him if he had indeed escaped. At that very moment, Leon entered the room carrying a huge fish and proudly announced that he had just caught it in the mountains. Moan was delighted, exclaiming that her father was truly amazing. Then, turning around, he found the queen looking at him. Realizing she was awake, he stopped in surprise, but Losvisor, equally surprised, asked why he was still there. Leon replied with a smile that he had just gone out to get some fresh air and, at the same time, decided to catch some fish for his dear wife. But Losvisor clearly didn't like the way the man called her. Leon, however, gently instructed his daughter to take the fish to the kitchen. The girl, delighted with the responsibility placed upon her, assured him that he could rely on her. When the little girl ran away, Leon told her to have dinner first because he and her mother needed to discuss something in private. Left alone with him, Losvisor admitted that she believed he would take advantage of her condition to abandon the girls and run away. However, he asked how he could run away when there were so many unresolved issues between them. The woman looked at him puzzled, unable to understand what he was talking about, and asked for clarification. Then Leon reminded Losvisor of the events that had happened a month ago, of the moment when he had woken up. Panic now colored her face, and she begged him not to tell her that he had intended to follow this very course. However, his smile showed that her fears were not unfounded. Losvisor warned him not to think he could take advantage of her weakness, urging him to refrain from reckless behavior. But Leon reminded her that he was weak too when she branded him with the dragon seal without giving him a chance to fight back. In response, the woman promised that he would pay for what he had done, and that he should not risk doing something he might later regret. But Leon, calling her his dear wife, insisted that he did not feel the slightest regret. Then he picked her up in his arms and confidently declared that this was the best decision in his life. Leon decided that now it was her turn to be a prisoner. As he carried her through a forest of cherry blossoms, an indignant Losvisor ordered him to let her go immediately. But despite her squirming, Leon sternly warned her to stop struggling, or she would fall from his arms. The woman understood that if she had regained her strength, she would have beaten this guy half to death. Finally, Leon lowered her to the ground under the vast canopy of a tall cherry tree. Sitting there, Losvisor asked him why he had brought her to such a place. Leon explained that while she was unconscious, he had been searching for the places she loved most, and this was to be their first destination. Confused, the dragoness demanded to know what he meant by the first destination. The young man pointed to a castle in the distance and explained that from its height, one could see everything in perfection. Then Losvisor asked suspiciously if this was his attempt to take revenge for what had once happened in his homeland. Leon confirmed her suspicions, noting that returning a favor was, after all, a right reserved for dragons. Suddenly, the seal on the dragoness's chest began to glow faintly. Leon stated that despite being human, he had a strong sense of pride and duty within him. Holding Losvisor tightly, he urged her to look straight ahead, directing her gaze to the palace rising in the distance. He described him as the source of all her pride and dignity, but now she could only allow him to manipulate her. Leon, gently pushing her forward, asked what it felt like to be defeated by a man who was once a fallen dragon hunter. He reminded her that this was exactly what she had once done to him. Losvisor admitted to herself that she wanted to resist, but her body betrayed her, giving in to a desire she could not suppress. But suddenly her tail wrapped around his body. Astonished, Leon wondered out loud how she still had the strength to do this. Losvisor then stated that while he was in control of the situation, he should make every effort to make her feel ashamed and helpless. The woman said that after this, she would take even more severe revenge on him. But Leon asked her not to talk about the future, because he always lives in the present. He then announced that the night had been long, and that Her Majesty's banquet of vengeance was only just beginning. The story soon moved to the morning, to the Queen's chambers. Leon, waking up next to the dragoness, felt joy at finally returning. Fatigue had settled over him because he had spent the whole night tormenting Losvisor, moving her from place to place. Yet, looking at her face, he noted with satisfaction that she seemed pleased. Suddenly, Leon realized that he shouldn't care about her pleasure, because he was coming here for revenge. He was sure that Losvisor must have experienced the utter humiliation of being pinned to the ground by a dragon slayer. But Leon convinced himself that she had felt everything, and that despite everything, his revenge had been accomplished. He decided that he should return to his quarters before the maids began their morning duties. However, as he was about to get up, he felt his wife squeeze his thigh. In her half-sleep, Losvisor barely audibly muttered that she was cold. Leon thought that it was just a natural instinct of a living creature to seek warmth, but he reminded himself that he must not be deceived again. And yet, despite this, he gently placed his hand on hers, and then lay back down on the bed, because that way Losvisor would be warmer. Meanwhile, the birds had already begun to sing outside the window, and everyone in the palace was slowly waking up. Muan wondered out loud why her mother hadn't gotten up yet. The girl approached her mother, saying that the sun had already risen, but there was no reaction from her. Losvisor only quietly asked her daughter to go play with her dad. Muan obediently went to her father, but he was also fast asleep. He quietly told the girl to let him sleep a little longer. At this point, Muan became very angry that they were not paying attention to her, but she didn't want to ruin this picture, because her parents hugged each other so tightly. But she also wanted to play. It was the first time Muan had seen her parents so affectionate. However, she didn't understand why there were so many red spots on their bodies. Suddenly, Muan assumed that they were simply bitten by mosquitoes. Then she remembered that she had been taught to apply medicine to insect bites. Soon the girl exclaimed with delight that she had found the ointment. Assuring them that they had nothing to worry about, she promised to look after them herself in her sister's absence. She began to apply the ointment to her parents' bodies, saying that she would add some more for her father. Sometime later, Losvisor woke up more fully and asked her husband to get up too. As soon as he opened his eyes, Leon asked in bewilderment why his face was wet. He quickly discovered that they were both smeared with green ointment. Laughing loudly, he asked Losvisor what had happened to her face. Then Muan proudly explained that she had taken it upon herself to care for them because they had so many red marks from insect bites. Losvisor frowned suspiciously, while Leon noted that there were certain things that children didn't need to know. Then Muan asked them if they thought she was a real good girl. Leon praised her, saying that she had done well, and the girl readily promised to repeat the procedure next time. However, the couple silently decided to keep the door tightly closed from now on. Later, Leon returned with a bowl of food and held out a spoon to his wife, insisting that she eat. Losvisor looked at him in confusion, asking what such a gesture meant. He explained that she had not eaten for several days, and that even as a dragon she must be hungry. But Losvisor objected that she didn't need to be fed, and that she could manage on her own. However, after tasting the food, she reluctantly admitted that it was not bad. Leon replied with satisfaction that it was fried rice, prepared with his love. When she noticed that he was also eating, she asked why he was doing it, and he explained that he was just helping. In the end, Leon reminded her that all these last days he had tirelessly taken care of her, bathing, cooking, and even feeding her. At this point, Lostweiser asked if her husband had spoken of the torture he had inflicted on her after her bath or after dinner. Leon, however, denied that any of this was torture. For him, it was the attention of a devoted husband. As he was about to leave, Lostweiser warned him that every time he acted like a fool, she gave him another chance to get revenge. She said that he was just a damn dragon slayer, and he really had a rare talent for tormenting her. Suddenly, she hit the headboard with her fist, the wood instantly cracking from the impact. At that moment, the dragoness realized that her strength had finally returned to her. Meanwhile, Leon stood at the sink and washed dishes, completely unaware of the danger. Later that day at the palace, the faithful maid Anne entered the queen's chambers and handed over a bottle of medicine prescribed by the doctor. Lostweiser, however, refused this, declaring that her body had already healed and such potions were no longer necessary. Then Anna, while cleaning the room, noticed the broken headboard and asked what had caused such damage. The queen calmly admitted that she had overdone it with her strength and told her maid to call someone the next day to fix it. Lostweiser also asked her not to tell Leon that she had recovered. She would like him to continue to care for her for a few more days. The maid's eyes widened in surprise, but she replied with a smile that she understood her perfectly. To herself, the Dragon Queen thought that her husband's peaceful days were quickly coming to an end. 2 days later, Muen rushed to her father and asked if he could teach her how to make her body glow. Leon, surprised, asked if she meant the sparkling magic her mother had demonstrated during her training. He then asked her why she suddenly had a desire to study magic. Muen explained that her sister has already learned a lot at school and does not want to fall behind. Then Leon realized that the girl also wanted to learn something, and she agreed. He came to the conclusion that the rivalry between the sisters was actually an advantage. With this in mind, he enthusiastically agreed to teach Muen, stating that they would start from the very basics of mana. Soon after, the little girl began to focus on the exercises with all her might. Leon was amazed because in just a few hours she was already channeling mana with ease, and it seemed like she would soon awaken her powers. As he watched her, he wondered if she might be a genius, but Muen suddenly stopped and announced that she was hungry and very weak. Then Leon decided that there was no reason to rush. He announced that they were finishing their lesson for the day and going to look for food. Muen clapped her hands happily, calling her father the best. Returning to the room, Anna brought the requested things, and Lostweiser curtly told her to leave them in the corner. As soon as Leon entered the castle, his wife dismissed the maid. Leon thought that, according to Anna, Lostweiser would need another 5 days before she recovered, which meant he still had time to tease her. With this in mind, he approached her gently and offered to give her a massage. But Lostweiser challenged him, asking why he had not shown strength and accusing him of disappointing her by not lasting more than 2 days. Leon, taken aback, asked her to repeat her words. Then he pulled the blanket off her and shouted that he thought he was letting her rest, but he was obviously wrong. Taking her chin in his hand, he mused out loud that if she could speak so boldly, then her body must be equally strong. As he took off his shirt, he warned her that she would regret her words. However, Lostweiser, smiling defiantly, replied that she never regretted anything. At that moment, her tail shot up and wrapped tightly around Leon's waist. With a quick movement, she threw him onto the bed. Then the dragoness sat on him, pinning him to the bed with a force that stunned him. It dawned on him, and he asked if she had fully recovered her strength. But Lostweiser silenced him, reminding him that prisoners needed to know how to remain silent. Seeing handcuffs, a whip, and a strange ball on a table nearby, Leon, confused, asked when she had prepared such tools. Bound hand and foot, he began to fear that he had voluntarily stepped into the lion's den. Looking down at him, the queen warned him not to resist. Leon then asked if she was going to torture him to get information. He countered that he had undergone special training and would never give in. But Lostweiser doubted he was truly so sure. Suddenly, the magic crystal began to glow, projecting a recording of Leon's voice. It was his confession that he wanted to kiss her. Realizing what it was, Leon desperately begged her to turn off the crystal. Lostweiser, however, teased him cruelly, asking who it was that was begging her now. The crystal continued to play the recording of Leon pitifully begging the dragoness to let him kiss her, but he vehemently denied it, insisting that it couldn't be him, that it must just be someone who looked like him. Then Lostweiser asked if he would like to see the scene more clearly. The image expanded further, where Leon spoke of his desire to hug her, kiss her, and become one with her. Finally defeated, Leon admitted that there was no need to continue, as he remembered everything. Then Lostweiser took the whip that lay next to the bed and ordered him to repeat over and over again the very words he had spoken in the recording. When Leon hesitated, she suggested he recount the moment if his memory failed him. Without waiting for his answer, Lostweiser repeated what had happened that night. Later, Leon lay on his bed, completely exhausted. While he was resting, a messenger dragon arrived and handed a sealed letter into Losvisor's hands. She opened it and quickly read it. Then the man wearily asked if a letter had arrived from the academy, and why the messenger had been sent so late at night. Losvisor informed him that the academy had called them for tomorrow. She revealed that Noah had been involved in a fight, leaving Leon completely stunned by the news. Meanwhile, in Deputy Director Wilson's office, Noah simply stood silently. Opposite her stood 3 guys with small horns, their bodies covered in bandages and bruises. The deputy principal decided to discuss the incident involving the girl and the fight she had with her classmates. Losvisor asked what exactly he meant, and demanded to know if the 3 young dragons had banded together to bully her daughter. As Leon watched over Noah with concern, the girl assured them that she was unharmed and feeling fine. Then the teacher explained the situation in more detail. The victim was not Noah, because she was the one who beat up the 3 boys. Losvisor, hearing this, asked if this was really so. However, Leon expressed his pride by praising Noah, saying that she was truly his daughter. While the altercation itself was minor, it revealed deeper tensions between the cocoon dragons and the living ones. Dragons reproduced in both ways, and while the difference meant little as adults, their abilities differed greatly as juveniles. Dragons born in a cocoon immediately inherited the strength of their mothers, while those born alive had to develop it gradually. Thus, the fact that the live-born Noah defeated 3 older opponents born in the cocoon spoke volumes about her potential. At this point, the boys' fathers entered, and at first one of them tried to minimize the problem, even offering to cover the medical costs. However, when his gaze fell on his son, his expression became stern, and he demanded to know who had beaten him. The stunned boy, sobbing, threw himself into his father's arms. Losvisor whispered to her husband that this boy belonged to the family of the Red Dragon King, Constantine. The nobleman then turned to the woman and accused her of allowing her daughter to bully other dragons. Leon intervened sharply, saying that if their clan lacked strength, then they should not have sent their children to pursue his own. The angry father demanded an apology, but Leon instead stated that his fists were ready if the man wanted a fight. The deputy director slammed his hand on the table in irritation and demanded silence. According to his investigation, the altercation began in the cafeteria, where Lal and his friends got into an argument with Noah after her plate stained Lal's clothes. Later, when she returned to the dorm, 3 boys cornered her in the courtyard and a fight broke out. When asked for their version of events, the boys lowered their heads and said nothing. At that moment, Noah raised her hand and asked for permission to speak. The deputy turned to Noah and allowed her to tell her side of the story. The girl explained that Lal had deliberately provoked her in the cafeteria and later attacked her in the courtyard, leaving her no choice but to defend herself. Without taking her eyes off Lal, she demanded that he confirm her story. He remained silent, but finally nodded reluctantly, and his father, confused, asked him why he was so afraid of her. Leon suddenly intervened, to everyone's surprise, telling his daughter that he thought she had made a mistake. Noah looked at him silently, waiting for an explanation. Her father then advised that if a similar situation occurred again, she should aim for the knee. When she asked why, Leon explained that a crimson dragon with a knee injury would inevitably be defeated in battle. This, however, only angered Lal's father further, who accused Leon of encouraging his daughter to bully his son in front of everyone. He demanded that the unruly student be expelled without delay. But the deputy director once again asked him to calm down, reminding him that only the academy had the right to make such decisions. He went on to say that several witnesses had confirmed that it was Lal who had instigated this particular altercation. Then his father screamed, asking if the academy was now trying to exonerate Noah and put all the blame on his son instead. Leon objected, asking what right he had to complain if his daughter, who was only 1 year and 2 months old, had managed to defeat his son. Then Lal spoke, stating that he was 7 years and 11 months old. Leon responded with a chuckle, declaring that if such humiliation befell him, he would shoot himself out of shame. Lala's father countered that Leon didn't even have the courage to show his own tail, so he had no right to talk about his son. He then pointed at Losvisor and Noah, stating that their entire family was nothing but trash, commoners. Then Leon grabbed the man by the arm and warned him that insulting his wife and daughter was unacceptable. Losvisor, watching her husband, quietly noticed that he was fiercely protective of his family. Then the nobleman demanded to know how Leon dared to raise his hand against him, and whether he understood to whom he was addressing. He proudly announced his title, calling himself the Duke of the Red Dragon Clan. But Leon simply looked at him with mockery. At this point, Losvisor intervened. She said it was nothing more than a petty squabble between students, and that imposing titles would not help anyone. Turning to the deputy director, she stated that she trusted the academy's judgment and would accept whatever decision it made. The teacher then warned the Duke that if he persisted in stirring up a scandal, he would only make matters worse. In this case, his son may even lose the right to study at the academy altogether. Lal, frightened, pulled his father by the sleeve and begged him to calm down because he wanted to stay at school. The man reluctantly gave in, admitting he had lost his temper, and agreed to abide by the school's decision. Before leaving, however, he cast a dark glance at the Losweiser family and warned that the matter was not yet closed. Finally, the deputy director ruled that Lal had provoked the conflict and that Noah had defended herself, although her reaction had been excessive. Therefore, Noah will receive a verbal warning from her teacher and will have to reflect on her behavior. Lal and his comrades, on the other hand, had to write self-critical essays and take responsibility for cleaning the classroom. Noah then said goodbye to her parents, saying that she would return to class, and her mother gave her permission. As the girl was leaving, Leon called out to her, reminding her that if anyone bothered her again, she should immediately hit him in the knee. Suddenly, the deputy director appeared behind Leon and called his name, startling him so much that he almost jumped. Leon turned around and asked if Wilson needed anything from him. The teacher replied that he had had this question for a long time, because Leon had never shown his tail. This unexpected remark left Leon speechless for a moment. After a pause, Wilson asked which dragon clan he belonged to, if it wasn't too secret. At this point, Losweiser intervened, explaining that her husband was just an ordinary dragon. The vice principal accepted their answer, remarking that in that case it was nothing less than a miracle that their daughter possessed such a remarkable talent. He added that the academy welcomes children like her, and even suggested that the couple should consider having more children. He expressed his belief that Noah would one day lead the dragons to victory over even more dragon slayers. Leon responded modestly with words of gratitude, choosing not to show his true emotions. Father Lala watched from a distance as the three of them talked in the hallway. His expression hardened as he ordered his henchmen to move out. Soon after, Leon and Losweiser headed towards the academy gates. As soon as they reached the entrance, Lala's father stepped forward, blocking their way, and called out to the queen of the silver dragons. Losweiser looked at him calmly and asked if he had anything else to say. The aristocrat claimed that the agreement was nothing more than a formality designed to avoid trouble with the academy. He warned that now that they were outside these walls, everything would be decided in a dragon-like manner. Gesturing towards Leon, he immediately challenged him to a duel. Losweiser knew that to refuse such a challenge would be to provoke rumors of the silver dragon's weakness. The red-haired man, sensing their hesitation, continued to taunt them, demanding to know if they intended to retreat. Then, in a quiet voice, Losweiser asked her husband if he really wanted to fight. But Leon calmly replied that since the man had offered himself, he would gladly accept the challenge. His wife agreed, but begged him not to kill the man. Meanwhile, the rumor of the duel quickly spread, and soon the students hurried to the entrance, wanting to witness the duel. Hearing their chatter, Noah immediately suspected that her parents might be involved. On the neighboring balcony, students were discussing who the participants in the fight might have been. The redhead looked at Leon with disdain, stating that the man seemed weak, talkative, and too cowardly to show his tail. With his own son defeated, he declared that he would restore the family's honor by defeating the girl's father in combat. He arrogantly suggested that if Leon lasted 3 rounds, he would declare himself the loser. Leon, however, rejected these conditions, urging him instead to stop bragging and begin immediately. This provocation enraged the nobleman. Shouting that such impudence was unbearable, he rushed forward. He intended to attack Leon with a fire strike, but Leon met the blow head-on, blocking it with ease, noting that this guy was weaker than the dragons he had faced before. Then he smiled triumphantly, reminding himself that there were still 2 rounds left. As Leon stepped back, the man accused him of cowardice, saying this as he slammed his fist into the ground, releasing a shockwave. However, Leon dodged the blow by jumping into the air, but the nobleman immediately threw a roaring stream of fire at him. However, Leon looked at the approaching flames without a shadow of fear. He then easily dodged and appeared again next to his opponent. He announced that it was now his turn to attack. With a swift motion, he kicked the man straight in the knee, causing him to scream in agony. As the aristocrat collapsed to the ground, staring at him in disbelief, Leon gave him no respite, immediately punching the man in the face. He was so strong that his body fell far to the ground. Leon then dusted off his hands and noticed that an opponent with such meager abilities didn't even need to summon magic. The nobleman's servants panicked, shouting the name of Duke Lair. Then Leon turned to them and asked if they wanted to try their luck too. The men immediately turned pale and refused, declaring that they had no desire to fight. Then Leon ordered them to take the Duke away, and told them to tell his son that he would never bother his daughter again. Satisfied, he turned to leave. However, he suddenly noticed Noah standing nearby, and somewhat surprised, Leon asked when she arrived. The girl explained that she was just passing by when she noticed the commotion. Then she handed the box to her parents, saying that it was a gift. Upon opening it, Losweiser found a large heart-shaped cookie. Noah explained that she had baked the cookies in cooking class. Since she only placed second, it might not be particularly tasty, but she still wanted her parents to try it. Lossweiser immediately countered, insisting that the cookies were delicious, and insisting that Leon try them too. Leon agreed that everything their daughter cooked was wonderful, and promised her that next time she would definitely take first place. Noah's eyes lit up with pride, and then she turned to her father, telling him that his performance in the duel was amazing. Leon was taken aback by his daughter's unexpected praise, but soon he smiled broadly. He decided that his relationship with Noah had become closer, and he was incredibly happy about it. The man chuckled, agreeing that he was very strong. Leon gently stroked her head and offered to teach her any fighting technique she wished to master. Sometime later, Leon leaned back on the sofa and calmly read a book. At that moment, Lossweiser suddenly entered his room with a first aid kit in her hands. Leon immediately put the book down and asked his wife in surprise what she was doing there. Instead of answering, the dragoness silently sat down on the sofa next to him, and the man began to suspect that she was up to something again. Then Lossweiser asked with concern if his arm was injured. Taken by surprise, Leon was silent at first. Then he looked at the wound and replied that it was nothing serious, just a scratch that would heal in a few days. Without hesitation, Lossweiser prepared cotton wool and medicine to treat it. While she was looking after him, Leon was thinking to himself. As a dragon slayer, he had countless scars on his body, and he was used to dealing with them roughly. And yet now, for the first time, he felt the touch of the man who had tenderly treated his wounds. He noticed the warmth and softness of her hand as she treated his wound. Then Lossweiser sincerely thanked him for his protection. However, Leon simply replied that it was his duty, because in the eyes of others, she remained his wife. Soon after, the dragoness mentioned that her sister had invited them over. At first, Leon hesitated, but after hearing it, he eventually changed his mind and agreed. Lossweiser smirked. She already knew that this guy was quite stubborn. So they set out on their journey together, and soon reached the territory of the Red Dragons. As they approached their destination, Leon, holding Muen in his arms, announced that they had arrived and gently urged the girl to wake up. Soon Lossweiser's older sister Aisha appeared before them to greet them. Seeing her sister in her dragon form, she noted with admiration that her form remained as impressive as ever. Then Lossweiser herself took on human form, and Aisha immediately hugged her, saying that she was very cute in human form too. The woman then introduced her husband and daughters. Lossweiser told her husband's name, and Aisha was very happy to see him in good health. Then the dragoness introduced her two daughters to her sister, Muen and Noah. Aisha hugged one of the little girls, correctly guessing that it was Muen, and then turned to the other, recognizing her as Noah. Soon after, Aisha turned to Noah and asked if she could hug her too. Although the girl was shy, she still did not refuse her aunt. Then Aisha immediately pulled the second twin towards her. Overjoyed, she said that holding two little dragon girls in her arms at once was pure happiness. Then, turning her gaze to Leon, Aisha expressed gratitude for his efforts. She heard that he spent most of his time taking care of the girls. The man immediately smiled and said that it was not difficult for him, because he loves taking care of children, which is why they are drawn to him. Lossweiser, however, intervened, stating that she was sure the girls got along better with her, but Leon countered that that was impossible. Their sister, who had been watching the light-hearted exchange, laughed and remarked that they really did seem to get along very well. Lossweiser, blushing slightly, admitted that perhaps they did get along well. Aisha then invited the family inside, noting that they must be tired after their long journey. Soon the whole family had dinner, and then they went to the living room. Then Aisha took out an album and invited the girls to look at photographs of their mother when she was little. Muen immediately exclaimed joyfully that she really wanted to look at the photo, but Lossweiser, caught off guard, demanded that her sister hand over the photographs she had been hiding. At that moment, Leon realized that he needed to help the red-haired woman. Aisha then tossed the album to Leon, while her younger sister gave chase, trying to get them back. Leon admitted that he never expected to see such a playful side of his usually reserved wife. As soon as he opened the album, his face was immediately illuminated by a bright light. His daughters, however, were filled with excitement and begged to see the photographs as well. In response, Leon finally showed them the photo and teased Lossweiser, noting how active she seemed during her student years. Aisha explained that she was giving a speech here as one of the most outstanding students at the academy. Leon smirked and asked how she had changed so much since then, becoming distant and cold. However, as she snatched the photograph, Lossweiser muttered that he shouldn't get cocky because he might be the next victim. Aisha, meanwhile, happily reported that she still had many photographs from the time when their mother was young. When they came across Lossweiser's baby photos, Noah marveled at how tiny their mother was. Leon joined in, pointing to another photo and noting that their mother looked exceptionally stylish in it. Aisha proudly explained that the photo was taken on the day Lossweiser inherited the title of Queen of the Silver Dragons. Leon was impressed with her look and admitted that she really looked great. When they reached the last page of the album, Moen pouted in disappointment, lamenting that there were no more photos left. Then Lostweiser took the album from her and said that since they were finished, her sister should carefully put the photographs away. However, the older sister said with a smile that their research was not finished at all. She asked if they knew what she was now holding in her hand. Without hesitation, Leon exclaimed that he recognized it immediately. It was a memory stone. Isha turned to Muen and Noah and asked if they wanted to watch the footage of their mother, and the girls happily shouted that they did. Lostweiser, however, became worried and begged her sister not to show what was on the stone. Leon, however, begged his daughter-in-law to show it, realizing that the content of the videos must be terribly embarrassing. Lostweiser cried out her sister's name in despair, but Aisha only smiled. With a mischievous glint in her eyes, she declared that since this was Leon's first visit to their home, she would fulfill his request. Leon greeted this decision with joy, while Lostweiser muttered that she would never bring him here again. Soon the stone was activated, and when the projection came to life, the elder sister proudly announced that what they were about to see was of great value. Lostweiser recognized the place instantly. She tried to cover Leon's eyes in horror, insisting that he not look, but Leon resisted. The projection showed the older sister asking the young Lostweiser what kind of husband she would like in the future. Lostweiser, embarrassed, explained that the man had to have good grades first and take first place in the competition. She continued by saying that he must have a sense of responsibility and love children. Her husband must also be powerful, but must never abuse that power. Aisha noted that such qualities were extremely rare, as so many who gained power were inevitably corrupted by it. At the end of the recording, Lostweiser firmly stated that if a man with such character traits had not existed, she would never have married. But if she ever marries, it will only be to such a man. These words clearly touched Leon. He realized that he had been her ideal from the very beginning. Lostweiser, however, waved it off sheepishly, insisting it was nothing more than a silly statement from her youth. Then her older sister asked which of them confessed their love first. Lostweiser and Leon immediately pointed at each other, each insisting it wasn't him. Lostweiser then challenged her husband to repeat his statement if he dared. Leon, not wanting to take any chances, replied that she had indeed confessed first, and although he had refused her, he had regretted it and later confessed to her himself. Aisha, who had been watching the altercation with a smile, noted that, as she had suspected, they were indeed getting along wonderfully. The couple denied it simultaneously, their voices heard throughout the palace. Later that evening, Leon whispered to his wife that they would have to sleep in the same room. But when they entered, they both stopped abruptly. The room was decorated in an overly romantic manner. Shocked, the couple asked what the hell it was. When Lostweiser turned to her sister for an explanation, Aisha replied with a satisfied smile that she had prepared the guest room especially for them, as they would be staying here for a few days. Lostweiser asked if there was another room available, but her sister insisted they not be shy. At that moment, Leon realized that he needed to be careful. These women were not to be underestimated. In fact, Isha intended to lock the pair away so they could fulfill their mission to revive the race. Leon immediately protested, declaring that he wanted to leave. But before he could reach the door, Aisha appeared behind him, blocking his path and asking where he was going. The young man tried to justify himself by saying that he wanted to see his daughters, but the woman explained that she had already prepared a room for them. At that very moment, Moen and Noah were in their room full of toys, working together on a big puzzle. Then Aisha closed the door with her body, wishing the couple a good rest. Leon came to the conclusion that they had no choice but to spend the night there. He acknowledged that his daughter-in-law possessed an unrivaled strategic mind. Lostweiser, opening the closet, noted with a tired sigh that her sister had always been like this. However, she suddenly slammed the closet shut with unusual force, leaving Leon perplexed. She then informed him that since there was only a single bed in the room, he would have to sleep in the jacuzzi. Leon asked with displeasure why he had to take the bath. Moreover, the drain hole was blocked. Isha had deliberately arranged everything so that they would be forced to share a bed. As he approached the mattress, he noticed that it looked different, almost unusual. He soon wondered out loud if it really was a waterbed. Without further thought, he lunged at her, exclaiming how soft she was, while Lostweiser looked at him suspiciously. Leon, smirking, declared that he would not allow her to enjoy the bed alone and suggested that they lie down together. When she agreed, Leon asked why she suddenly changed her mind and whether she was secretly planning something. Losing patience, Lostweiser asked him point blank whether he wanted to sleep or not. She then offered to let them use items from the wardrobe, but Leon backed away, insisting it was unnecessary. The woman then declared that she would take a bath first, and sternly warned him not to dare to spy on her. Leon replied that he didn't even want to do it, but Lostweiser didn't believe him, so she pushed him out of the room. Stepping out into the cool night air, Leon noted to himself that he had seen his wife so many times. However, suddenly he felt someone's presence. It was Sister Losweiser, watching him silently. She asked why he went outside, and Leon explained that his wife was taking a bath and he went out to get some fresh air. Then Aisha walked over to a small table where a bottle of wine stood and invited him to have a drink. Leon readily agreed, and as she poured the wine, Aisha mentioned that this particular wine was Losweiser's favorite. Accepting the glass, Leon thanked her politely. Then the young man remarked that the two sisters seemed to share a deep connection. Aisha confirmed this, explaining that they often sat together in this very spot, drinking and talking until late at night. After Losweiser's coronation, they mostly exchanged letters until her marriage and pregnancy were announced. Aisha admitted that even after the wedding, the sadness in her sister's words was evident. Losweiser confided in her that her husband had been ill and sleeping a lot, leaving her almost alone to bear the burden of a twin pregnancy. Leon suddenly realized how difficult it had been for Losweiser to go through this without him, and rely only on his sister for comfort. Aisha admitted that at the time she thought her sister had married a lazy and irresponsible idiot. Leon laughed slightly and asked if he really looked like him. The woman admitted that over time she came to the conclusion that he was not worthless at all, and that there were hidden reasons behind it all. In the end, it only confirmed how deeply her sister truly cared for him. Leon stopped mid-sentence when he heard this. He quietly asked himself if Losweiser really loved him that much, but almost immediately he dismissed the idea, convincing himself that such a proud dragoness simply could not feel such affection for him. His sister-in-law then teased him, asking if he was embarrassed, but Leon silently retorted that she knew nothing about her own sister. However, he admitted to himself that in front of her they had to pretend that they were getting along well. However, soon after his tone changed, Leon declared that their love was true. Then Aisha answered without hesitation that she already knew this, because it was clear from the way they treated each other. She added that Losweiser was terrible at expressing her emotions, and Leon was the first man she had ever treated that way. She then reminded him to be responsible, and learn to cope without her help in the future. But Leon reassured her that although he had not been with his wife during her first pregnancy, he would be with her if there ever was a second. He swore that he would protect both his companion and their daughters at the cost of his own life. Aisha replied that she hoped that he would indeed keep that promise. She then urged him to stop bragging and return to the room before Losweiser lost her patience. As Leon turned to leave, Aisha called out to him again. With a mischievous smile, she advised him not to hold back that evening, assuring him that the room's soundproofing was impeccable. The unexpected discovery left him speechless. Leon closed his eyes in despair, unable to come up with an answer. Leon then quietly returned to the bedroom and found Losweiser already in bed. As he got closer, he wondered if she had really fallen asleep so quickly. Then the man decided that he would not suffer that night. He also noted that Losweiser looked so peaceful and beautiful in her sleep. Yet, as he looked at her, something strange caught his attention. From under the blanket, it seemed as if her chest was faintly glowing. He immediately wondered with horror if her dragon seal had somehow worked. However, when he looked down, he saw that his own seal had not responded. Then Leon reached out to explore the mysterious light under the sheet. To his surprise, Losweiser suddenly opened her eyes and calmly greeted him. A shocked Leon demanded to know why she had frightened him by hiding the lamp under the blanket. With a mischievous grin, she admitted that she had found the object among the toys and had only wanted to play a joke on him. She continued to tease, noticing that, judging by his reaction, he didn't seem disappointed at all. Leon immediately denied everything, insisting that it was not true. Flustered, he turned away, pulled the blanket over himself, and muttered that he was going to sleep and that she shouldn't talk to him anymore. Then Losweiser, smiling, warned him that he should not try to take revenge on her in the middle of the night. Suddenly, a spider fell to the floor in front of Losweiser, frightening her so much that she couldn't even figure out what it was. When she realized what it was, a scream escaped her throat. Before Leon could get his bearings, Losweiser jumped into his arms, clinging tightly to him. Trembling, she admitted that there was a spider in the room. Leon, surprised by her reaction, remembered the image he had seen earlier in the album, where she was depicted in tears because of a spider. He thought that even the Queen of Silver Dragons harbored fears within herself. Leon then said that he had no choice but to deal with this creature. However, when he picked up the spider, he immediately realized that something was wrong. He discovered that it was just a toy spider. Leon calmly explained that there was no reason to be afraid. Losweiser, however, refused to listen and demanded that he get rid of it immediately, insisting that whether it was real or not. Seeing her agitation, Leon reassured her by promising to throw it away immediately. He then threw the fake spider out the window, turned back and assured her that the threat was over. As he thought about what had happened, he began to suspect that this too was part of his daughter-in-law's carefully thought-out plan. It was all to get Losweiser to show his more fragile, vulnerable side. Now calmed down, The woman timidly asked if she could sleep on one side of the bed while he stayed on the other. Leon replied that she could sleep wherever she pleased. A few moments later, the two of them were lying silently in the same bed. After a while, Leon asked if Losweiser would like to hold his hand if she was still scared. Losweiser looked at him without answering immediately, but then, giving in, said she would agree if he insisted. As their hands interlocked, Leon asked if she felt safe enough holding only his pinky. He smiled at her shyness, calling her silly, and showed her the proper way to hold hands by intertwining their fingers. Losweiser wondered how he managed to touch her so naturally, and if she was the only one who felt this strange warmth. However, she chided herself, reminding herself that as the Dragon Queen, there was no shame in holding someone's hand. Leon noticed how cold Losweiser's hands were, but she noticed that the coldness actually came from his hand, which was stiff with excitement. The woman also felt the calluses and scars left from so many years of wielding the sword, rough but very warm. Where their fingers intertwined, she felt as if a current ran through her very skin. Losweiser sank into silence, surrendering to the sensations. The night dragged on very, very slowly. Leon soon found that he could not sleep. He turned to his wife, wondering if she was already asleep. As he was stretching his fingers, numb from the position, he touched her hand. Feigning sleep, Losweiser wondered to herself why, instead of simply holding her, he was now poking her hand with his finger. Then she came to the conclusion that perhaps this brave prisoner had dared to touch his mistress. The woman thought that if this was so, then she would touch him too. The next moment, Leon flinched as he felt her hand move. Confused, he tried to understand why she was touching his hand. He admired the softness of her body where it pressed against his, the gentle warmth that spread from the touch. A desire suddenly arose in him, growing rapidly, and he felt that the same desire had taken possession of her. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, their faces came closer. The couple looked at each other, unable to resist the desire. Then Leon climbed on top of Losweiser, leaned over her, and decided that for this one night, he would give himself over to the moment. Meanwhile, his wife was whispering his name in a trembling voice. Even as Leon prepared himself for what was to come, he was shocked to realize that his dragon mark had not reacted in any way. The fact is that the seal flared up only when passion lacked true feeling, but when love was genuine, it did not manifest itself. Yet, this intimate moment was ruined by the sudden fall of a toy spider that landed between them. This was soon followed by a piercing scream from Losweiser, echoing throughout the hall. Stepping outside, Isha chuckled to herself, deciding that they must have discovered the little surprise she left behind. Meanwhile, Leon held Losweiser tightly to himself, calming her down. He assured her that everything was fine, and that she no longer needed to be afraid. Pressing her face against his chest, Losweiser noted how fast his heart was beating. Then Leon admitted that he too was afraid of spiders. Hearing this confession, the dragoness decided that she would no longer force him to catch spiders. Finally, she asked Leon never to talk about what had just happened. When morning came, sunlight softly filtered through the room's window. Losweiser woke up with a start and sat up straight. She wondered when she had fallen asleep, and then asked herself if Leon had woken up earlier. She consoled herself with the thought that perhaps it would be for the best, because after the previous night she didn't know how to look him in the eyes. As she dressed quickly, she thought that this was the first time she had betrayed her own strict principles. Losweiser lamented her weakness, remembering that she had even fallen asleep in a man's arms. Finally fully clothed, she decided that sharing it was too humiliating, and that she should keep it a secret from everyone. However, the moment she opened the door, her sister asked if she was awake yet. Isha teased her, asking how her night was. Losweiser admitted sheepishly that it was indeed exciting, though she doesn't want it to happen again. Then Isha, leaning closer, whispered to ask if they used toys, to which Losweiser answered in the negative. Then her sister laughed and promised to pack some toys for practice in the future, already asking about the next child. In response, Losweiser grabbed her hand and told her she didn't need to worry about it, insisting that they have breakfast together. Meanwhile, in the great dining hall of the Red Dragon Castle, Leon was already with the children. He playfully squeezed Muen's cheeks, causing the little girl to open her mouth wide. At that moment, Losweiser and Isha entered the hall, and Muen, noticing them, joyfully exclaimed that her mother and aunt had arrived. Unable to contain her excitement, the girl immediately asked if they could start eating. Soon the whole family gathered at the table, and they began to eat breakfast in silence. During the meal, the spouses deliberately avoided meeting each other's eyes. Leon, meanwhile, was thinking about how awkward the situation had become, remembering how dangerously close he had come to kissing Losweiser last night. One part of his conscience reproached him, accusing him of betraying his homeland, while the other persistently whispered that they were married. While this internal conflict was raging within him, Leon suddenly realized that the bread in front of him was rather tasteless. Hoping to improve the taste, he reached for a jar of peanut butter. But before he could take it, Lostweiser placed her hand on his, and for a moment they looked at each other in confusion. At this point, Isha explained that she had designed their waterbed herself with the goal of making the couple's hearts beat faster. She added that there were small buttons on the edges that released toy spiders intended to scare Lostweiser. Finally, she revealed that the mechanism remained inactive only if the couple hugged each other. Meanwhile, Leon had been polite enough to insist that Lostweiser take the pasta first, and although she was still nervous, she did. Soon after, her sister leaned over to them and asked why they both had such red faces. Lostweiser, embarrassed, said that the dining room was unbearably hot, and Leon, wanting to support her, confirmed this. Aisha then suggested that the couple return to their room and take a bath together, but they immediately rejected the idea. As for Sister Lostweiser, it seemed no matter how many times she teased them, the couple's reactions never ceased to be enjoyable. Wanting to change the subject, she turned to the couple and asked if it was true that they had recently encountered the Red Dragon clan. Lostweiser recounted how Noah bravely defended herself against the Duke's son, while Leon himself boasted that he had easily defeated the Duke. After hearing this story, the sister praised Noah, calling her truly wonderful. She then explained how the Duke had rushed towards their leader Constantine, and had caused quite a scandal because of it. Leon, recalling the dragon histories he had studied, remembered that Constantine had once become famous as a hero who had expanded the clan's holdings. However, Isha warned them that Constantine was seeking to expand his power, and could use this as a pretext to spark conflict. But Lostweiser firmly stated that something terrible would happen if he dared to attack her refuge just for the sake of the Duke. She will not hesitate to teach the Red Dragon clan a lesson they will not soon forget. Soon the family headed to the gates of the Red Dragon castle to say goodbye to Aisha. Aisha asked them to return safe and sound, and Lostweiser promised that they would come again another time. Immediately after this, Aisha presented them with a parting gift, warning them that they should open it only upon arriving home. She then turned her attention to the twins, telling them to eat more meat so that they would become strong and be able to play again. Muin happily declared that she would eat even more from now on, while Noah simply nodded in her usual calm manner. Then finally Aisha turned to Leon, reminding him not to forget the promise he had made. The young man assured her that he would definitely keep it. Lostweiser, watching from the side, couldn't understand what they were talking about. The girls waved happily at their aunt as they took to the skies, and she wished them a safe journey. Back at the castle, Isha wandered around the hall, thinking about how charming and cute the little dragon girls were. She then wondered curiously when the couple might have their next child. Suddenly, when she opened the door, the toy spider descended from the ceiling again and stopped right on her shoulder. Taking it in her hands with a smile, Aisha thought that Leon was really protecting his wife. Somewhere far away, at that very moment, Leon suddenly sneezed, wondering if Aisha had discovered the little surprise he had left for her. He realized that Lostweiser and her sister were completely different from the dragons he had known in the past. Instead of pride and dominance, they valued family above all else and showed rare sincerity in their love. It was very strange for him that Aisha trusted him so much. As they flew back, Lostweiser began to question him directly about what he had promised her sister. Leon, however, asked if she really wanted to know, and then teased his wife even more by refusing to tell. By nightfall, they finally returned to the castle. The twins were already fast asleep. As she left, Lostweiser quietly closed the door behind her and found Leon waiting for her in the hallway. When she saw him, she hesitated for a moment, and then he asked her to personally play the video they had seen yesterday. Leon's revenge plan was to use his wife's dark past and attack her psychologically. He then began to imitate the very scene where young Lostweiser sang about her love of swimming and blowing bubbles. The dragoness, humiliated beyond all measure, became furious. As it turned out, her sister showed little Muin several more such videos in the Red Dragon Castle. In the video, young Isha invited us into a room where a bright light was pouring through the doorway. It turned out to be the bathroom where Lostweiser was. Lostweiser sat in the bathtub and sang about how much she loved to wash herself, how she blew bubbles. Watching this scene, Leon could not help but mock his wife, sarcastically comparing her singing to that of a lark. Lostweiser, overcome with shame, screamed that she would destroy the recording, but Aisha declared that she would keep it as a family heirloom. The gift now lay on the table, and Leon, looking at it, noted with relief that the box was intact and safe. Laughing at the absurdity of it all, Leon said it was nothing more than a joke. At that moment, Lostweiser looked at him closely and noticed that he was obviously having a lot of fun. Then she grabbed him by the collar and, calling him by name sternly, made it clear that there would be consequences. Suddenly, she suggested continuing where they had left off last night. Leon realized that his provocation had gone too far, and he thought it best to run away immediately. However, when he tried to escape, he discovered to his horror that the bedroom door was locked. Losvisor stood at the entrance, giving him only 10 minutes to appear in her room. She warned that she would show him the consequences of bullying her with the help of such humiliating videos. Leon stood frozen in front of the closed door, trying to comprehend what had just happened. He scolded himself for the way his own tongue always managed to get him into trouble. He admitted to himself that he had not expected such a reaction from Losvisor. He eventually came to the conclusion that the warrior's dark past was indeed her greatest weakness. Talking aloud to himself, he declared that such torment was nothing more than the inevitable price to pay for the noble mission of hunting dragons. With tears in his eyes, he resigned himself to this fate, that his body might break down. Leon reminded himself that everything made sense as long as it could hurt the Silver Dragon Queen. Leon mentally warned her to prepare herself for what was to come. 10 minutes later, when he finally entered the room, a scream came from inside. Stretched out on the bed, he begged Losvisor, exhausted, not to be too harsh with him. However, the woman with the whip in her hand took on a new role. She demanded that he call her his teacher. The amazed young man teased her, telling himself that she played the female dragon well. Then Losvisor shouted at him not to dare speak like that. And then she lashed him with her whip, causing him to cry out sharply. She warned him that he had said something wrong again, as if he still didn't understand the situation he was in. It was then that Leon realized that the whip itself was not truly painful, but it was a humiliating sensation. Gradually he realized that her true goal was not to hurt him, but to confuse him with this role. Losvisor played the role of a strict teacher, while he was nothing more than a naughty student who made a mistake. To continue the scene, she asked him if he now understood his mistakes. Getting into character, Leon apologized to his teacher, promising that he would obey and not make such mistakes again. Losvisor then pressed her point further, demanding to know if he was ready to hand in his assignment. Confused, he asked what task she was talking about. She scolded him sharply, wondering how he could vow to study hard when he didn't even know his assignment. However, the dragoness noted that he was lucky to have such an understanding teacher. Finally, she said that he had to make her dragon mark glow. She warned that if they failed, the punishment would be much more severe. After some reflection, Leon admitted to himself that after so many nights spent together, he recognized every sensitive spot on her body. Soon his touches had the desired effect, and Losvisor praised him, noting that he was indeed a quick learner. At one point, Leon asked if the lesson was over and if he had enough work. But Losvisor explained that it was a warm-up exercise. She sternly reminded him that he hadn't even turned in the real assignment yet. Astonished, Leon asked if this was really possible. Then he again felt himself defeated by the merciless claws of the dragoness. He wondered if this whole game had something to do with the dragon mark on his chest. Suddenly his throat went dry, his body ached, and Leon pulled Losvisor tightly to him. When the job was done, Leon thought the lesson was finally over. During this time he was very exhausted and was glad that Losvisor had finally calmed down. Having risen to his feet and tidied up his clothes, he asked if he could now leave, since he had already completed the task. But just as he was about to move away, Losvisor grabbed him by the clothes and pulled him back. She explained that he had only completed one subject and that there were 6 more left. Leon froze in shock, and a moment later his cry of despair echoed throughout the area. The next morning, Losvisor walked easily through the corridors, refreshed and radiant. At the same time, the young man hobbled next to her with trembling steps and dark circles under his eyes. Noah noticed that he looked like he hadn't slept at all, and Muen pointed out the deep shadows under his eyes with concern. Leon explained in a tired voice that he had been up late doing his homework. Moen asked if adults were also forced to do homework, and Losvisor confirmed that adults had homework just like children. After this, the girls were silent for a while. Suddenly, Muen smiled broadly and announced that she had discovered the law of the universe. Whenever their mother was doing well, their father was weak, and whenever their father was strong, their mother was weak. Leon praised her insight, saying that she was smart enough to notice truths that most people don't even realize. He promised that he would be the first to stand up for her if anyone dared to say that she was only good at being nice. Noah listened to them with her arms crossed over her chest, and soon raised her eyes to the sky. She announced that the time had come when a large passenger dragon flew overhead. Then the girl said goodbye to her mother and younger sister. Losvisor urged her to be careful, and Muen asked her sister to come back quickly so they could play again. Leon also said goodbye to his daughter, wishing her good studies and promising that they would see each other again next weekend. But the girl simply nodded in response, then announced that she was leaving. A moment later, her figure was enveloped in the light of teleportation. As the dragon soared upward, Muen and the dragon family waved goodbye to Noah. Leon then asked his youngest daughter what they should do now that her sister had gone to school. Muen reflected on how her father seemed tired while her mother looked deeply concerned about him. She then announced that since her sister was gone, she would take responsibility for making sure her father trained and became stronger. Pulling his hand, she invited him to run with her around the training field, and he agreed. Lostvisor watched this and thought it would be really interesting to see what happened next. When Leon started counting the number of approaches, Moen asked why he needed to do that. He explained the importance of warming up before physical activity, and the girl said she understood. Then, to their surprise, Lostvisor approached them and announced that she wanted to join them too. Seeing her mother, Moen clapped her hands in delight, happy that she would also be running with them. Lostvisor warned her daughter that she would not give in, to which the girl replied that she would not be lenient with her mother either. Leon then warned Lostvisor not to twist her ankle, as she spent most of her days sitting in an office. She, however, playfully teased him, recalling the last competition she won. Their squabble excited Moen, and she began to scream with joy, seeing her parents arguing again. But Leon quickly clamped his daughter's mouth shut and reminded her that children should not encourage fighting. However, Moen asked why her father couldn't fight her mother, and Leon was surprised when she learned to provoke. He then told his daughter that the only reason her mother won was because he didn't want to hurt his wife. However, Lostvisor called him stubborn and proposed a new challenge, a competition to see who could run the longest. Leon, full of determination, agreed to the test, not wanting to be left behind. Moen confidently declared that she would not lose either. At that moment, the maid stepped forward, raised her hand, and gave the signal to start the race. At that moment, all three rushed forward together. While running, Leon asked Lostvisor if her tail was getting in the way. She simply replied that, on the contrary, the tail actually helped her maintain balance, which was something he clearly lacked. Lostvisor further provoked Leon by demanding to see his own tail, but he retorted that he didn't need it to win. After 2 laps, Moen collapsed to the ground in exhaustion, admitting she could no longer continue. The maid rushed to her, comforting and praising her for the excellent performance she had given in any case. She then invited the child to stand next to her and cheer for the queen and king from the sidelines. Leon realized that he had no advantage. The silver dragons were naturally fast, and now he was facing one of their best fighters. Nevertheless, he gathered his courage, because there was no turning back. Since his honor as a dragon slayer was on the line, he firmly told himself that he could not lose to Lostvisor. Then he remembered one of the ancient codes of the fighters. They are born for battle and are doomed to rest only after death. 20 minutes later, Leon lay sprawled on the ground, his breathing ragged and his body shaking with exhaustion. Lostvisor approached him and asked if he was ready to admit defeat, but Leon firmly refused. Smiling, the dragoness asked if he still intended to continue running since he refused to give up. Leon, still out of breath, asked for 2 days of training, promising that after such preparation he would surely defeat her. But the woman teased him, saying that even 2 years would not be enough for him. But he nevertheless insisted that he could achieve this. Then Lostvisor came closer and asked if he, now defeated, intended to finally show what he was truly capable of. However, Leon evaded the answer, saying that her vindictiveness would not lead her to anything good. But the dragoness said with a smile that she was a professional in this matter. Lostvisor then called Moen and announced that since her father had clearly weakened, they would now train together. The girl, hearing this, remarked that her father was indeed quite weak and that he needed to train more. Leon froze, speechless, hearing such a judgment from his own daughter. Lostvisor, holding the girl's hand, left, and Leon called after them, urging his daughter not to underestimate her father. Later, Moen leaned tenderly towards her father and asked him to open his mouth so she could feed him. He complied, accepting the food. But immediately after this, fatigue overcame him, and he collapsed on the table, and Lostvisor advised him not to strain his body in the future. Still sprawled on the table, Leon muttered that he had only lost because of the grueling task she had given him last night. In response, Lostvisor teased him, asking if he would like to continue the same task that night. Hearing this, Leon suddenly jumped up from the table. He picked up Moen and announced that he would stay with his daughter instead, telling her a new story. When the girl asked in surprise if they had such an agreement, he firmly replied that it began right now. Lostvisor accepted this condition, but only after promising that they would not stay up late and would go to bed early. Hearing this, the little girl agreed with her mother. Then Lostvisor went out and walked alone down the long corridor. Suddenly she stopped and ordered the one hiding in the shadows to show himself. Shirley stepped forward and addressed her respectfully as Her Majesty. A spy has revealed that she has discovered the location of the secret residence where Tiger Lawrence once lived. However, the family had moved more than a year earlier and no longer lived in the Empire, all of their property having been donated with one exception. Shirley added that the only thing they didn't give away was the donkey. She explained that neighbors said the couple loved the animal very much and made sure to take it with them when they left. Lostvisor then ordered the spy to continue tracking Tiger's location. Shirley bowed and disappeared into the shadows again. Left alone, Lostvisor began to wonder why Leon's master had left the Empire. The next morning, Leon and Lostweiser's voices, surprised by the unexpected news, rang out in the castle when Noah told them about the family sports games. Her academy is actually organizing such an event next week. Lostweiser noted that in her own days at the academy, parents were never required to participate, but her daughter explained that this was a new initiative. Then Muen asked what place her mother had taken when she herself participated in the games. Lostweiser proudly announced that she took first place. Soon after, Muen turned to ask about their father. Leon said he performed so well that the academy suspected him of cheating, and therefore refused to publish his results. Upon hearing this, the girl immediately asked if this meant that her father was really a fraud. But Leon denied this, and explained that although the academy had secretly awarded him the medal, he had melted it down to make a bracelet for his grandmother. Leon replied that he preferred not to have fame that he could not openly display. Finally, Lostweiser asked if he really intended to participate in the upcoming sports festival. Noah explained that the event was meant to be fun rather than competitive, and that it would not affect grades. However, with determination in her eyes, the girl said that she really wanted to take first place. It was then that Leon realized that his daughter had truly inherited his competitive spirit and obsession with being the best. At that moment, he exchanged a knowing glance with Lostweiser. Without hesitation, the parents announced that they would join the event with her. Inspired by the idea, Moen expressed her desire to participate as well, but Noah said that only 3 participants were allowed. To encourage Muen, her father gently told the little girl that her support would be absolutely essential for their victory. Hearing this, the girl immediately beamed, agreeing and promising that she would cheer with all her might. Leon encouraged his daughters by saying that if the whole family worked together, they would definitely win. Determined to prepare, Leon soon began early and intense training. During the training, Leon's gaze fell on Lostweiser for a moment. He reflected on how the woman looked like a model. No matter what she chose to wear, it seemed to suit her perfectly. Soon after, Lostweiser suggested taking advantage of the quiet morning for a warm-up jog, since the children were still asleep. Lostweiser explained that the competition would include running, high jump, and long jump, all of which she had previously competed in. Leon noted that it wasn't much different from their competitions, but she warned him not to underestimate the dragon competitions. But Leon countered that dragon slayers weren't nearly as easy to defeat as she might have thought. Then Lostweiser remembered that just a few days ago he had collapsed after running just a few laps. This memory clearly angered Leon, and he loudly protested, declaring that it was her fault for keeping him awake all night. Amused by his indignation, Lostweiser paused and asked if he wanted a little extra motivation. She suggested that if they managed to take first place, he would get a whole week off. Leon, suddenly becoming agitated, asked if she was serious. When Lostweiser confirmed her words, his determination immediately redoubled. Boldly declaring that the tournament would belong to their family, he rushed forward with a triumphant cry. Observing him, Lostweiser found that her motivational methods were quite effective. At the end of the warm-up, she approached him and asked if his muscles and joints had woken up. Then Leon, filled with strength, jumped up and declared that his body felt as if it had been struck by the power of a dragon. Then Lostweiser picked up the jump rope and noted that since the event was family-oriented, the competition would likely be a little different. For this reason, they need to train their team coordination rather than focusing solely on individual strength. Leon stepped back and asked what the rope was for, hinting that she might be planning to tie him up again. Then Lostweiser asked him if he had never heard of running on 3 legs. Embarrassed, Leon admitted that he had once seen a similar competition at the Dragon Slayer Academy. Lostweiser announced that their basic coordination test was about to begin, and Leon, though reluctant, eventually agreed. The moment their legs were tied together, Leon realized how uncomfortably close they were now standing. To ease the awkwardness, he insisted that they begin training immediately. He insisted that she start moving, wondering why she remained motionless. Lostweiser replied that he hadn't even said where they were supposed to go, and Leon pointed to the field because if they fell, it wouldn't hurt as much there. They stumbled awkwardly as they took their first steps, Lostweiser screaming at him to stop pushing her, and Leon saying that she was the one pushing him. Leon then warned her not to disturb his rhythm, but Lostweiser sarcastically thanked him for such a delightful joke. Leon then decided to count down to coordinate their steps. However, just as he finished his countdown, Lostweiser suddenly charged forward at full speed. She dragged a completely unprepared Leon along with her while he screamed in terror. Later, while he was trying to untie the rope, he asked the woman if she even understood the meaning of cooperation, but Lostweiser only made fun of him for not being able to keep up with her. To solve the problem, Leon suggested a simple counting system for each leg, and she agreed. He suddenly touched her side lightly, startling her, but quickly explained that it would help them stay in sync. An excited Lostweiser allowed him to do so, but asked him to start quickly. This time, thanks to the new method, Their synchronization gradually improved as they moved in rhythm with his counting. Time flew by, and finally the long-awaited day of the Academy's first family sports competition arrived. Standing at the podium, Deputy Director Wilson announced the opening of the historic event. From the stands came the cheerful voice of little Muen, shouting out sincere words of support to her father, mother, and sister. Shortly after, commentator Pineapple introduced herself to the crowd and explained that she would be reporting on the entire competition. She announced that the first round would be a relay race, in which each family would send 3 participants. The distance will be 3,000 meters in total, and the family that completes the distance in the shortest time will be in contention for victory. One of the organizers then asked the families to take their numbers and head to the appropriate starting points. Having received their numbers, Noah quickly decided that her mother would conduct the first stage, and she would take part in the second. Then, a little embarrassed, she suggested that Dad be the third. Leon responded to his daughter with a wide smile, agreeing and happy that Noah called him Dad. Then Losvisor said the race was about to begin and urged them to get ready. She then assured her daughter that she should not be nervous, promising that she would be the first to pass the baton to her. Meanwhile, Leon and Noah stood at their assigned positions, eagerly awaiting their turn to run. Finally, Leon reminded his daughter that he would be waiting for her at the third stage and urged her to take care of herself. He then asked if she would cheer for him during the race. Noah was clearly embarrassed, but still promised to encourage her dad. Then they sealed their mutual trust with a firm fist bump. Shortly after, the announcer's voice rang out across the field, announcing that the relay was about to begin. From the stands, Moen waved her pom-poms energetically, cheering her mother on with all her might. As the starting signal sounded, Loswiser surged forward with a baton in her hand. Pineapple commented that runner number 7, a representative of the Silver Dragon clan, had pulled ahead, leaving her competitors behind. She then pointed out that runner number 10, Misty of the Electric Dragon clan, was quickly closing the gap. Standing next to Leon, one of the fathers proudly noted that it wasn't only the Silver Dragons that were fast. This made Leon think about the Electric Dragon clan, who were renowned masters of evasion and feints in battle. Pineapple then approached President Duncan to get his opinion on who could win the relay. He calmly replied that nothing could be considered decided until the very end. Nearby, Misty's husband was bragging to Leon that his wife was so far ahead that the outcome was already obvious. With a confident smile, he admitted that there was no denying her impressive performance. However, Leon only grinned, and then the man felt that something was wrong. Leon confidently stated that his wife Losvisor was even cooler. Suddenly, Losvisor sped up even more, her pace quickening sharply. Misty looked at this with disbelief, wondering where such explosive power came from. Meanwhile, Loswiser herself reflected on the wind resistance she had encountered while holding the lead for so long. Her rival soon realized that she could no longer keep up with Loswiser. The commentator noted that the 7th used her opponent's body to reduce drag and gain speed on the finish line. Pineapple then confirmed that Loswiser was the first to pass the baton. A moment later, the runner in number 10 also finished the race, and the commentator wondered whether the new rival would be able to catch young Noah. As Loswiser watched her daughter run away, a flash of worry ran through her body. Then Leon gave an encouraging thumbs up. In response, the woman clenched her fist, completely trusting the next stage to her child. Meanwhile, Pineapple reported that the second stage participants have already started. She noticed that Noah and another runner, Dean, were now leading the race. As he ran past her, Dean mockingly called Noah Shorty. Noah, however, was sure that she couldn't let him get too far ahead of himself. From the stands came the loud voice of Muen, who had been cheering for her sister the whole time. The commentator speculated whether Dean's lead could prove decisive, but Duncan reiterated that it was not decided until the last moment. A moment later, Pineapple informed spectators that both runners had entered the final turn and were now heading toward the finish line. The excitement increased as the two dragons ran side by side, not giving an inch. Everyone was wondering which of them would be the first to pass the baton to the third and final runner. Finally, Dean passed the baton with a small lead, and Noah completed her exchange as well. Then Noah turned to her mother and apologized for missing the advantage she had earned. But Loswiser quickly reassured her, telling her daughter she had done brilliantly and reminding her that her opponent had the advantage. She then suggested that they go to the finish line together to cheer for Leon. Meanwhile, Muen shouted from the stands that her father was the best. On the track, a rival runner warned Leon to be careful. Having pulled ahead, the opponent laughed loudly. Leon, however, thought to himself that he had been very much mistaken if he had thought that a man so obsessed with the promise of a vacation would give in so easily. As the race became more intense, the commentator reported that Gordon and Leon were speeding up. Noah, who had been watching the scene closely, whispered words of encouragement to her father. Suddenly, Leon heard her voice over the roar of the crowd, and the way she called him Daddy. A wave of emotion washed over him. and with newfound confidence he told himself that he couldn't lose now. Having gained new strength, he increased the pace and caught up with his opponent. Gordon, amazed, realized that if this continued, he would soon be overtaken. Determined not to give in, he mentally threatened to make Leon taste defeat. Suddenly he tried to trip Leon, and Leon barely dodged the blow. However, justice prevailed very quickly. Gordon tripped and fell just before the finish line. Immediately after this, Pineapple announced that Leon had crossed the finish line first. She congratulated the Milkway family on their victory in the relay race. Overwhelmed with joy, Leon hurried to Noah and asked what she had just called him. The girl repeated the word daddy with a shy expression on her face. Leon tried to persuade her to say it again, but Noah told him that she would only do it if they managed to take first place in all the games. Then Losweiser approached them and asked if Leon was hurt, but he assured her that he was perfectly fine. However, at that very moment, Gordon rushed to the judges, accusing Leon of cheating when he threw sand at him on the final stretch. Leon objected sharply, demanding to know how the man who had attacked him could now pose as the victim. He pointed to electrical marks on the enemy's clothing, indicating an unsuccessful attempt to strike him. Leon told judges he was running at full speed and may have accidentally kicked up some dust, but insisted it was not his fault. Then one of the organizers asked Gordon to come with them, but his wife quickly intervened, not allowing him to get close to him. Suddenly a man stepped forward and demanded to know what was going on. Gordon immediately tensed, for it was none other than Saul, the leader of the Electric Dragons and president of the arbitration committee. Leon quietly asked Losweiser if the old man was from the Electric Dragon clan. She nodded, looking in his direction. It was clear that Gordon was trying to rely on the clan's loyalty. Since Saul was the head of the clan, it seemed likely that he would side with them. But Saul remained unperturbed. He called the judge with a crystal ball, and the committee carefully reviewed the video recording. Saul then declared that Gordon had broken 2 rules. His family's right to participate was revoked, and all points were invalidated. Gordon tried to object, not knowing what else to do. However, Saul abruptly cut him off and ordered him to be silent. Saul then approached Leon and Losweiser and apologized for the dishonor caused by a member of his clan, taking full responsibility. Losweiser calmly replied that she hoped he would raise his people properly. She noted that if her husband had been injured, an apology would not have been enough. Saul then promised to give his man a fitting punishment, and his guards led Gordon and his team away. Watching this, Leon muttered how generous his wife was, but Losweiser reminded him not to use the word wife so casually. Leon just smirked, saying he was complimenting her. Meanwhile, the presenter declared the relay completed and introduced the next competitions. In a jumping competition called Young Dragon, Noah flew up to take a bite of a donut and scored 50 points. In the adult division, Leon and Losweiser ran flawlessly in the 3-legged sack race, earning another 50 points. They also won the quiz with 25 points. Then, in the family feeding competition, Losweiser fed Leon noodles while blindfolded and also received 50 points. The crowd was thrilled when the couple made it to the finals and qualified for the competition called Cooking with Love. The judges explained the rules to them. They had to prepare an appetizing and healthy dish for the whole family. Preparation time is 1 hour, and the final result will be assessed by judges. Also, according to the rules, the spouses could not untie the ropes on their ankles. The couple were horrified when they realized they would have to coordinate their actions again. Leon and Losweiser drew their dish by lot, hoping for something easy. But to their horror, they had to make cream puff pastries. None of them knew how to make it, but the judges said the recipe would be provided. Then the boys put on aprons, lit the stove, and began to follow the instructions. Leon cooked while Losweiser went to get the ingredients. But suddenly Noah appeared on the big screen in Balloon Battle Royale. She was the last one to stand against 3 larger dragons. They tried to intimidate her into giving in, but she stood her ground. Now everyone was wondering if the girl would be able to get ahead. As the 2 dragons rushed forward, she turned and slid between them, tearing both of their balls apart in an instant. The crowd gasped, then erupted in cheers as Noah quickly eliminated her last opponent. She was declared the Balloon Battle Royale champion, the youngest in her division to accomplish such a feat. From the stands, little Muin proudly announced to everyone around her that this was her sister. Meanwhile, Leon laughed with pride, confident that their daughter would win. Then Losweiser smugly noted that Noah clearly took after her. Suddenly, Leon gently brushed the flour off Losweiser's nose, causing her to blush. Neither of them realized that the tender moment was being broadcast on the big screen. Meanwhile, Pineapple admired their display of affection. Meanwhile, Wilson watched the dish being prepared, noting that it was not just about taste, but also about care and a spirit of teamwork. Leon, waving his hand listlessly, jokingly wondered which dragon he needed to kill to end the sports meeting early. After a while, a tray of golden custard tarts stood on their table. The aroma alone caused the judges to murmur with hunger. Assistant Director Wilson noted that the dough was perfectly crisp and the filling smooth and balanced. He remarked that the couple must have made this pastry at home often. Lostvisor hesitated for a moment, then casually nudged Leon with her elbow, indicating it was his turn. Leon took the hint and responded diplomatically, noting that his wife loved cream puffs and that they often made them together at home. Wilson chuckled, remarking that their family life must be very colorful, and asked what secret ingredients they might have used. Leon and Lostvisor immediately grabbed each other's hands, turned to the judges, and simultaneously revealed that the secret ingredient was love. After a brief discussion among the judges, the scoreboards were released, and all 3 judges gave them top marks. Leon grinned widely, triumphant, knowing they had won first place. He was especially pleased with the fact that he was about to get a long-awaited vacation from Lostvisor. In the end, the Alex family from the Dragonclaw clan came in 3rd place, receiving a voucher for Teshwa noodles. 2nd place went to the Ross family of the Winddragon clan, who received a B-class magic tome. Finally, the champions were named. Leon, Lostvisor, and Noah stood on the highest podium. Pineapple declared the Milkwhite clan the winners, and they received a luxurious 7-day hot springs trip as a prize. Leon stared at the certificate incredulously. It matched the long-promised vacation exactly. Lostvisor squatted down next to Noah, looking over the certificate, and asked her daughter if she wanted to go on vacation. Behind them, Leon sank to his knees, his chance for a proper vacation gone. After the ceremony, the family returned to the Silver Dragon Castle and gathered around the table, raising glasses in celebration. Leon and Lostvisor drank wine, and the girls enjoyed fizzy juice. Noah was a little embarrassed, but thanked her family for helping her win. Lostvisor smiled warmly, saying they simply did what parents were supposed to do, but the real effort came from the kids. Lostvisor also noticed Leon's uneasiness and glanced at him quickly, wondering why he seemed so discouraged. Before she could think about it, Noah stood up and asked everyone to close their eyes. When everyone closed their eyes, Noah was the first to hug Muen, who giggled, clinging to her sister. Noah then gently hugged Lostvisor around the waist, and she responded with a gentle smile. Finally, Noah approached Leon, hesitantly at first, her hands behind her back, but she finally took him into her arms. Leon flinched slightly, surprised by the unexpected gesture but quickly softened. He placed his hand on her head, realizing the depth of her affection. Then Noah tugged at his sleeve, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed him lightly on the cheek. But before he could react, Noah turned away. Then she announced that they could open their eyes. Leon touched his cheek, realizing that his daughter had indeed just kissed him. What really touched him was that Noah slowly began to show love for him as a father. Then Muen asked why Noah's face was so red, but she waved her hand and suggested they continue eating. The next day, the family arrived in Sky City, where the sun was shining brightly, filling the streets with a warm light. Leon exhaled and traced a single word with his finger on the foggy surface of the store window. Vacation. Laying his head on the table, he sighed, looking into the distance, mourning the loss of a real vacation. Leon, slouched in his seat, muttered something under his breath, wishing his wasted vacation had lasted at least 7 days. All his dreams were shattered, and he couldn't hold back his tears. A few moments later, Lostvisor emerged from the fitting room in a new swimsuit and asked his opinion. Leon only nodded briefly. Lostvisor was displeased because he didn't even look at her. Then Leon finally turned to Lostvisor, giving her a tired look and giving her a thumbs up. Lostvisor narrowed her eyes, unconvinced, and adjusted the strap of her swimsuit slightly, noting how tight it was. Then her gaze fell on another swimsuit hanging nearby. Leon, trying to maintain his composure, suddenly imagined his wife in such a revealing swimsuit. Then he suddenly felt a nosebleed. The man quickly turned away and wiped his face, but then came to the conclusion that the swimsuit did not suit her. Lostvisor sighed softly and returned it to the hanger, noting that she hoped Leon would like it. Meanwhile, the salesman, holding 2 small swimsuits in his hands, handed them to Noah and Muen. After changing, Lostvisor went out again, noticing Leon still bent over the table. But Lostvisor wasn't fooled. She knew his mood was driven by frustration with his vacation schedule. Then she reminded him that although this trip was originally intended for their daughters, he should be glad that they were glad. Leon glanced at Noah and Muen, and he responded with a forced smile, forcing himself to appear cheerful. Then Lostvisor moved closer and said that perhaps she could promise not to disturb him for the next 7 days. But Leon was skeptical of her statement, since she probably planned to do exactly as she pleased. Then Lostvisor raised 3 fingers and uttered a solemn oath of honor as the queen of the Silver Dragons herself. After a moment of thought, Leon exhaled and gave in, accepting the agreement. Then Lostvisor moved a little closer, warning him that he had only himself to blame if he didn't restrain himself. Confident in his abilities as a dragon slayer, Leon assured her that he would not touch her. Satisfied, Lostvisor finally left the man alone. The next morning, the family, Leon, Lostvisor, Noah, and Muen, arrived at the Valley of Flowing Clouds to relax in the hot springs. In the lobby, the receptionist received their voucher and examined it carefully, realizing that they were a family of champions from St. Hate. Then Losvisor nodded politely in response. Meanwhile, Noah and Moen were fascinated by the large aquarium in the lobby. Meanwhile, the receptionist handed Losvisor a keycard to the room. Leon frowned when he realized there were only 2 rooms, and immediately figured out that he would have to share a room with Losvisor again. The receptionist offered the honeymoon room, but Leon declined, blushing with embarrassment. Resigned, he followed the others to the elevator. As the family walked down the hallway, Leon's thoughts were preoccupied with escape. Then he suddenly asked if the girls wanted to stay in his room. But Moen said that she preferred to stay with Noah. The girl slightly wagged her finger, emphasizing that adults and children need personal space. Leon froze, realizing that his daughter's independence had sealed his fate. Noah then assured him that she could now take care of Moon herself, allowing him and Losvisor to spend time together. Then Losvisor handed the girls keycards to their rooms and asked them to call her if they needed anything. The girls immediately took the keys and rushed off to their room, but Leon theatrically wiped away a tear, lamenting that the children no longer needed him. Then Losvisor, teasingly waving her room card, called him to follow her. He didn't even suspect that his wife had taken that very camera with her. Now Leon needed to somehow delete the photos containing incriminating evidence against her before she noticed. Entering her room, Losvisor pulled back the curtains, allowing sunlight to fill the room. Leon agreed that the setting was indeed wonderful, but he still asked if she had been there before. But Losvisor explained that this was indeed her first visit, as she had been busy with clan affairs for many years. And now she wants to make the trip unforgettable. So she took a camera with her to take special, memorable photos of the family. The mention of the camera immediately sent Leon into a panic. Rushing to open the suitcase, he discovered inside a black camera, exactly the same as the one he had used before. Memories of the past flashed before him as he secretly took a photo of Losvisor in a bunny costume. Losvisor, noticing his unusual behavior, asked why he was handling the camera as if it were a baby. Then Leon forced a forced smile, and haltingly explained that he took photographs professionally, hoping to deflect suspicion. Surprisingly, Losvisor believed him and allowed him to take photos of the outdoor barbecue and fireworks with. They soon entered a lush garden, Noah and Moen walking impatiently ahead. Leon raised his camera, ready to capture their adventure. Soon the family wandered into the forest where fawns were grazing. Moen rushed to tenderly hug one of them, and Noah offered a carrot to another. Losvisor followed her, her hand gently stroking the deer's head, her daughters watching her, noting their mother's beauty. After the forest, they arrived at the amusement park, where the children's attention was drawn to the rows of slot machines. Losvisor carefully inserted the coin and concentrated, intending to catch the toy. Leon, watching his wife, quietly raised the camera and silently noted how sincere her face looked at that moment. She turned to Leon, who quickly took a photo, capturing her radiant smile. Losvisor noted to herself that his photographic abilities were much better than she expected. Leon soon went to get drinks, but the crowd pushed him into a long line, and while he was waiting, Losvisor suddenly appeared next to him. She held in her hands a small teddy bear that she had just won from a slot machine. She reminded Leon that he had given her a similar gift during their last visit to Sky City, so this toy would be his. Leon couldn't help but chuckle as he joked that he had a little teddy bear while hers was the king of the bears. Losvisor's expression darkened immediately at this remark. She clenched her fist, clearly upset that her gift had been laughed at. Meanwhile, Moen noted how slow her parents were, wondering when she would finally get her pineapple ice cream. Then Noah quietly said that sometimes she envied Moen. Moen, surprised, asked why she was jealous. Noah thought about how Moen could talk to their parents freely, while now she felt constrained. Then Moen said that if her little sister tried, she would succeed too. Noah explained that as she got older, her perspective changed, and she could no longer just say whatever she wanted. However, Noah wasn't always so precocious. As Moen's twin, she was only 20 minutes older. They grew up under their mother's care, sharing warmth and learning about the world step by step. In their eyes, their mother always seemed powerful, a figure worthy of admiration. That changed the day Noah saw her mother's vulnerability. She saw Losvisor sitting at Leon's bedside, overcome with sadness. For the first time, Noah realized that even such a strong and beautiful person could have a fragile side. From that day on, a desire to protect her family blossomed within her, and she began to strive to act like an adult. Noah pushed herself to learn and become stronger, all to help ease the burden that lay on her mother's shoulders. Determined, she continued to strive for perfection, vowing that her mother would never be sad again. Moen admitted that she couldn't fully comprehend it, but she admitted that she envied her sister because she understood many complex things. Noah blinked, caught off guard, She didn't understand how her sister could be jealous of her. Moan then explained that Noah was smart, capable, attentive like an adult, and had won countless awards. The girl admitted that she wants to be like Noah someday. However, the girl replied that Muen did not yet know what the future might hold for her. Then Moen, overcome with curiosity, asked what Noah would like to become. By watching her parents, Noah realized what she needed to do. She wanted to become the person they expected her to be. Then Leon knelt down and handed the drinks to his daughters. When evening came, as planned, fireworks began to be launched at the resort. Noah and Moen leaned against the railing, captivated by the spectacle. Leon and Losweiser were sitting on a bench nearby, their mother watching her daughters with a satisfied smile. Leon was also happy, feeling that as a father he wanted to capture every precious moment. Reaching for the camera, he realized that it was already in Losweiser's hands, who continued to look through the photographs. Leon tensed up, remembering how he had gone to the photo studio earlier under the pretext of going to the toilet. But unfortunately, there was no photo development service there. Suddenly, Losweiser stopped at her photo with the herd of deer, wondering when it had been taken. Leon's heart began to beat faster, and thinking quickly, he patted his pockets and found the 2 milk candies he had brought earlier in the day. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he offered one to his wife, hoping to distract her. However, Losweiser did not respond, so the man decided to feed her. The woman instinctively opened her mouth to accept the treat, still focused on the screen. However, she suddenly froze when she realized how close Leon had leaned in. Both spouses quickly pulled away from each other, blushing with embarrassment. While looking through the photographs, Losweiser noticed that, other than photographs of herself and their daughters, Leon had not taken a single photograph of himself. Thinking about this, she picked up the camera and suggested that they take a photo together. Losweiser explained that she simply wanted to leave the girls with a memory, and did not want to be misunderstood. She then adjusted the camera, noticing that Leon was not in the center of the frame, and gently nudged him closer. They then both smiled at the camera as the shutter clicked. Later, after enjoying the fireworks, Losweiser bought some sparklers near the observation deck and started playing with Noah. Meanwhile, Leon and Muen were sitting on a stone bench, the girl sleeping peacefully in Leon's arms. The man wondered why she wasn't playing with her mother and sister, but the girl said she was very tired and wanted to rest. She wanted her mother and sister to fully enjoy the moment, realizing how rare such opportunities are. Watching Muen, Leon gently stroked her head, thinking about how much she had grown. Although Muen insisted she hadn't grown up, she just wanted her family to be happy. These words touched Leon. He understood that each of his daughters expressed concern in her own way. Then he reached out to carefully lift Muen, intending to carry her to the others. But all he heard in response was a soft snore, and Leon was amazed at how quickly she fell asleep, realizing how exhausted she was. By the time Losweiser and Noah finished watching the fireworks, they noticed Muen sleeping peacefully in Leon's arms. Leon nodded and, carefully wrapping her in his coat, carried her back to the hotel. Noah followed her father silently, glancing at her sister from time to time, and this did not escape Losweiser's notice. Then the woman offered to carry her too, and although Noah was shy at first, she decided not to hide her desire and agreed. This is how the first day of their trip to the hot springs ended in such a cheerful way. After seeing the children into their room, Leon immediately collapsed onto the bed, feeling a huge relief at the sight of the soft mattress. Losweiser asked if he would sleep with her, and upon hearing this, Leon quickly raised his head, irritation flashing across his face. He hurried to the hot spring, pretending to want to soak in the water first. As he sank into the water, the day's fatigue melted away, and he enjoyed the tranquility of the moment. A fleeting thought reminded him that he still needed to figure out how to avoid sharing a bed with Losweiser. Suddenly the back door opened and Losweiser walked in. Leon froze, surprised that she hadn't gone to rest. The woman then explained that the fireworks finale was about to begin, and that she intended to go down to take a souvenir photo. At the mention of the camera, Leon tensed and looked around nervously, hoping she wouldn't notice. Unfortunately, Losweiser's keen eyes immediately noticed this, and she reached for her camera. Leon's heart began to beat wildly. He realized that if she saw its contents, all its secrets could be revealed. Thinking quickly, he suggested that they enjoy the hot spring together, just as fireworks lit up the sky. Losweiser, taken aback by his sudden proposal, looked at him curiously. Leon, slightly embarrassed, insisted that they rarely found themselves in such a place, and he wanted to make the most of this moment. Losweiser hinted with a playful grin that she had come prepared in a particularly charming swimsuit, which made Leon tense up. However, he didn't show it because he was a legendary dragon slayer. After this, Losweiser entered the house and began to change her clothes. Leon returned to the hot spring, although he could not shake off the oppressive feeling of foreboding. He reminded himself that he needed to hide the photos at any cost. Full of determination, he silently recited the 3 honors and 3 shames of a dragon slayer, preparing himself for the upcoming meeting. Soon the sound of the back door opening alerted him to Lostvisor's arrival. She was wearing a purple swimsuit trimmed with white lace. Unable to contain himself, Leon burst out laughing. It turned out the swimsuit was much less attractive than he had imagined. Lostvisor frowned slightly. She didn't expect the swimsuit her sister had prepared for her to look so ordinary. Leon, trying to suppress her laughter, noted that her sister had an unusual sense of style. Once the woman had settled in comfortably, Leon moved away a little distance, and they both remained silent, calmly basking in the warm water. Leon glanced sideways at Lostvisor and felt relieved that the swimsuit was much more conservative than he had imagined. And Lostvisor, noticing his detachment, realized that he was afraid of the possible effect of her dragon mark. Leon, however, said that he had nothing to fear. However, before he could fully resist her, he noticed something unusual. The swimsuit began to change. The purple fabric slowly dissolved in the water, turning into a revealing black bikini. Lostvisor blushed slightly at the unexpected transformation, but she quickly pulled herself together, deciding to test Leon's endurance. She moved closer to him, trying to seduce the man in the new swimsuit. Leon's face flushed with embarrassment, and he looked up at the sky, unable to meet her gaze. Then Lostvisor pressed closer. Leon, a seasoned dragon slayer accustomed to facing formidable foes, felt uncharacteristically flustered by her provocations. He realized that he needed to regain control of the situation. Determined, Leon decided to take the initiative, realizing that Lostvisor was trying to lure him into a trap. Lostvisor's first move, provocation, was immediately obvious. She sought to anger him, testing whether his dragon mark would react. Her next step, flirting, was aimed at attracting him physically, trying to provoke an emotional response. Finally, she wanted to shift responsibility and maintain superiority. However, Leon reminded himself that he couldn't let her provocations dictate the situation. Maintaining his composure, he admitted that she didn't scare him, and asked what she would do if his dragon mark reacted first. Lostvisor, confident, accepted the challenge. The woman was confident that she had perfect control over her desires, and never lost control. Leon reminded her that in every challenge there is a loser. He asked her what she would do if she lost. Then Lostvisor said that in that case, she would give him another 7 days off. Leon agreed, glad that this dragoness had taken the bait. Soon the night sky was filled with bright fireworks. Meanwhile, the two of them sat side by side, Lostvisor pointing to the patterns that reminded her of her dragon mark. Despite the spectacle, Leon remained vigilant, as Lostvisor had the advantage of her sexy swimsuit. Then suddenly the man heard his wife begin to sing. She said with a smile that her dragon pattern was like a star. When Lostvisor asked Leon to rate her singing, he said that he usually sings like that in the shower. Suddenly, Lostvisor exclaimed that her dragon mark was glowing. Leon panicked at the thought, instinctively looking at her chest, and suddenly his face turned red, and he even felt his nose bleed. He quickly turned away and wiped himself clean, but upon closer inspection he found no luminous marks on his wife's body. Realizing that he had been deceived, he felt a surge of irritation. He immediately realized that Lostvisor had already begun to try to seduce him, and he could not afford to stay away. While Lostvisor's attention was focused on the fireworks, Leon took the opportunity to reach out to her, keeping his eyes on her tail. However, as he moved closer, Lostvisor turned her head and caught his movement. Leon, who was already holding her tail, said that he just wanted to touch her cute tail. Suddenly, Lostvisor's expression darkened. She reached out to take the tail, but Leon's grip remained firm, unyielding. Leon knew her well. The tail was one of Lostvisor's most sensitive spots, so he rubbed it skillfully, checking for weak spots. The sensation spread from her tail throughout her body, causing an involuntary shudder. Lostvisor struggled to maintain her composure, her flushed cheeks betraying her attempts to resist. Having calmed down, the woman extended her hand to him and suggested that it would be very cute to hold her hand while watching the fireworks. Leon's heart started pounding. He didn't understand why it was like that, because he was just holding her hand. Their fingers intertwined and he squeezed them gently, feeling the overwhelming power of just touching her. Noticing his reaction, Lostvisor leaned closer, lightly touching his arm with her shoulder. She whispered that he should let his dragon mark react, tempting him. At that moment, Leon, vowing not to give in, suddenly moved and hugged her around the waist, pulling her closer. He met Lostvisor's gaze and said that they were both resisting the urge, but both were equally excited. At that moment, their dragon marks flashed simultaneously. Then the couple decided it was better to simply give in to their shared desire, and kissed passionately against the backdrop of fireworks. The next morning, their daughters knocked on the door to wake them up, but received no answer. Muan pressed her ear to the door, trying to hear any signs of life, but the room remained silent. Confused, she turned to Noah and asked why their parents hadn't come out yet. Puzzled, she wondered where her father could be, suspecting that he had disappeared without warning, as he had done before. Since her parents were still asleep, Noah decided not to wait for them any longer. Taking Muan by the hand, she led her to the elevator, intending to head to the dining room. Meanwhile, Leon and Lostweiser remained in bed. Soon, Leon slowly opened his eyes, stretching and rubbing his head, trying to clear the remnants of last night from his mind. Turning his head, he noticed that Lostweiser was still sleeping peacefully. Watching her serene expression, he thought about their shared defeat in the hot tub test yesterday. The memory of their first sincere kiss made his cheeks flush. Then Leon, without thinking, reached out and lightly touched her lips. But, amazed at his own audacity, he quickly pulled his hand back. He then jumped out of bed and rushed to the bathroom, muttering under his breath about how stupid his actions were. At the same time, Lostweiser pretended to be asleep to avoid awkwardness. She felt his timid touch to her lips and, raising her fingers, gently ran them over that place. The memory of last night came back vividly. Their first real kiss with the Dragon Slayer himself. However, she convinced herself that it was not her desire, but simply the unpredictable influence of the dragon sign. Later, Leon and Lostweiser went with Noah and Muan to the water park. With a mischievous smile, Muan raised her water pistol, carefully aiming at her target. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Noah scooped up some water from the pool and responded with an accurate splash. Meanwhile, Leon and Lostweiser remained sitting on a bench nearby, watching the children playing. The events of the previous night were still fresh in their minds, and neither of them was eager to get back into the water so soon. Soon their attention was drawn to two other dragons approaching them. A man with black hair walked hand in hand with a woman with brown hair. They politely introduced themselves as Zay and Yuna. Then Lostweiser and Leon reciprocated by saying their names in turn. The dragons explained that they were on their honeymoon at the Emerald Sea, but had moved to this resort due to disagreements between the dragon clans. Lostweiser noted the potential consequences, acknowledging that any movements in the region require close monitoring. Noting the closeness between Leon and Lostweiser, Yuna commented on how harmonious their relationship seemed. Leon frowned silently, realizing that their appearance contradicted reality. As Noah and Moen continued their games, Yuna expressed admiration for the couple's children. She hesitated before asking for advice on conceiving children. Lostweiser suddenly tensed, not particularly eager to explain the true nature of their children's origins. Leon covered his mouth with his hand, suppressing a quiet chuckle as he thought about Lostweiser's tendency to embellish stories. He then added that some things in life happen naturally, without requiring pressure from oneself or one's partner. Then Zay asked how disputes between him and Lostweiser were resolved. Leon smirked, leaning slightly towards Lostweiser, noting that she could appear aloof, tall, and fierce. However, there was a playful, spoiled side to her that he knew well. Then Lostweiser quietly moved closer to her husband, pinching him lightly on the waist. Meanwhile, Zay listened to their advice. Suddenly Leona became serious and said that even the strongest women have soft sides. However, a true partner must protect them. In his opinion, this is what made a man responsible and good. A week later, the family returned to the castle, and their life returned to normal. Shirley soon returned from her mission, telling the queen that she had found both the man named Tiger and his wife, hidden in a well-protected place. The place was protected by powerful magical bars and was inaccessible without flight. Lostweiser frowned, questions running through her head about why they were hiding there, and how they got there in the first place. Shirley added that Tiger was an unusually powerful figure, incomparable to other dragon slayers. Lostweiser realized that if even Shirley was afraid of him, it indicated the incredible magnitude of Tiger's strength. It became clear to her that Leon's master was not an ordinary person. Shirley further explained that Tiger discovered her during her mission, but spared her after realizing her loyalty to the Silver Dragon clan. He also conveyed a message to Lostweiser, demanding her personal presence. Lostweiser was taken aback, but delighted by his audacity. She was determined to meet him. After several hours of flying, Shirley pointed to a waterfall, indicating the place where Tiger was hiding. However, Shirley said the queen was asked to come alone. Finally, Lostweiser warned that if she did not return, Shirley must develop the necessary plan of action, creating a magical shield to protect herself from the splashing waters of the waterfall. Lostweiser stepped over the falling water and entered a huge cave. Inside, Tiger sat quietly at a stone table, brewing tea. Noticing Lostweiser, he gestured to the empty seat opposite him. She thought that although she had faced countless dragon slayers, Tiger's aura seemed even more formidable. Then the tiger poured tea and moved the cup towards her, saying that he had been waiting for this meeting for 2 years. He then asked how Leon was feeling, and Lostweiser confirmed that he was alive. She recounted Leon's capture and his relentless attempts to escape, but noted that despite the endless torture, he did not give in. Tiger remained calm, acknowledging Leon's stubbornness. and he also knew that Shirley was sent on behalf of Lostweiser, meaning Leon was useful to them. Lostweiser coldly replied that Leon had already paid his price. Then Tiger, placing his cup on the table, declared that Leon should not return to the Empire for another year. Lostweiser was puzzled by his refusal to demand Leon's immediate rescue. Tiger then went on to tell the story of the events of 2 years ago, when the Dragon Slayer army was defeated at the Silver Dragon Castle. Citizens demanded that someone take responsibility for the disaster, and the Empire, looking for a scapegoat, placed the blame on Leon. Leon, the famous Dragon Slayer hero, disappeared after the war, making him the perfect figure for suspicion. Therefore, if Tiger brings Leon back now, the people, the army, and even the Emperor will view him with suspicion, and perhaps even kill him. Lostweiser sighed quietly, admitting that she understood, but she set a condition. She demanded access to all of Leon's personal information, especially the dark pages of his childhood. The Tiger, surprised by the unusual request, raised an eyebrow but did not refuse. A moment later, he disappeared into the cave and returned with several boxes. From one of the boxes, he took out a wooden case and presented it to Lostweiser. He explained that it contained all the love letters Leon received from the time he entered until he graduated. Lostweiser, holding his letters in her hands, even allowed herself a mischievous smile, intrigued by the revelations about Leon's past. The Tiger, however, did not understand why the Dragon Queen was so interested in her captives. Among the letters, she found a small portrait in a gold frame of a blonde girl in purple, drawn by Leon as a child. Tiger explained that it was Leon's imaginary ideal partner, drawn when he was only 6 years old. Tiger, however, froze when he realized the similarity between the drawing and Lostweiser. He was sure that Leon would never have dared to create such an image, dreaming of getting engaged to the Queen of the Silver Dragons. Then Lostweiser asked impatiently if there were any more revealing secrets, but Tiger said that he could no longer betray his student. However, then, abruptly getting up, he apologized and went after Leon's first love, the so-called White Moon. Lostweiser, beginning to get nervous, realized she hadn't expected this turn of events, but it turned out that Leon's first love was actually an unusual donkey. Lostweiser could hardly contain her surprise when she discovered that Leon's first love was an animal, not a human. Tiger chuckled softly at her reaction, and told her how Leon had spent his childhood taming various creatures, but had had a particularly hard time with this donkey. The stubborn animal often ran away from him. One day, the donkey even kicked Leon, leaving a barely noticeable scar on the boy's nose. After that, Lostweiser's tension eased a little. Although she couldn't fully explain why she felt relieved over something as trivial as a donkey, she studied the animal closely, frowning at the expression on its face, which was clearly displeased. As soon as she was about to leave, she placed the photograph on the stone table. Before leaving, she remembered an additional request. She needed an item, proof that Tiger was still alive. Then Tiger took a letter from under his clothes and handed it to her, saying that Leon would understand it. Standing at the edge of the waterfall, Lostweiser acknowledged that this might be their first and last meeting. For Leon, however, her intentions extended far beyond 1 year. The Tiger remained at the entrance to the cave, watching her leave. Her words stuck in his head, making him admire her determination. Before he could continue, a gust of wind knocked the photograph off the stone table and it fell at his feet. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the shadows behind him, leaning against the cave wall. It was Charlotte Poseidon, Tiger's wife, looking at Tiger with calm concern, asking about Leon's well-being. Then Tiger reassured her with a smile and handed her the photo, showing with his facial expression that Leon was safe. Charlotte looked down, studying the photograph carefully, noting how well Leon was feeling. Noticing Tiger moving towards the cave wall, she realized he was about to make a decision. He walked up to the stone wall and picked up the sword lying there. The man intending to erase Leon's label of traitor and restore his name. He decided that this gesture would serve as a gift to his granddaughters. 2 days later, Lostweiser returned safely to the castle. It was time for dinner, and Leon noted that his wife looked very strange. Her disappearance for 2 days without a word alarmed him. Leon even asked Anna where she was, but she explained that the queen was away on business. Lostweiser's first order of business upon his return was to prepare dinner, and this behavior struck him as unusual. Soon Lostweiser came out of the kitchen with 2 covered plates. With a mysterious smile, she placed them in front of Leon and Muen. Moen had her favorite steak on her plate, and her eyes lit up at the sight. Leon's plate, on the other hand, was filled with a mountain of carrots, which left the man disappointed. Lostweiser, without the slightest embarrassment, explained that it was a vegetable salad, but then she made the correction that the salad also had carrots. But for Leon, this didn't change the essence. Then Muen asked her dad if he didn't like carrots, and Lostweiser teased him, reminding him of the value of healthy eating. Then Leon decided to eat all those carrots to spite her, although in his heart he cursed his wife for doing this on purpose, having obviously learned about his weakness. After dinner, Lostvisor announced that she would be sleeping in Leon's room that night. Hearing this, Leon choked on his carrot and his heart began to beat wildly. Later, Lostvisor took a bath and changed into a silky black nightgown. Meanwhile, Leon lay on the bed with a book in his hand, pretending to be calm. Then Lostvisor asked if he was waiting for her, but the man answered no. Then she sat down next to him on the bed. She patted the spot next to her, inviting him to come closer, and Leon could not resist the invitation.